seat and get started if you could. Welcome everybody, and thank you for being here. This is a meeting of the Early Childhood Education Subcommittee, and I just wanted to let you know that it's a little bit different than our normal committee meetings. So we don't have legislation that we're working on right now. We're not in session, but this meeting is to make sure that we get information about what's going on with the child care issues, and that questions get answered for stakeholders in the community and educators and families. And then we see where we go from here. So those are the goals of this meeting, and I think we have good representation from each of those groups, and we will hear from those folks, and then have questions from the members. And we'll start with the Education Subcommittee members first, then questions from the Education Committee, and then general questions from members, House and Senate. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. And we'll start with the Department of Education, and Secretary Leva can come up and answer some questions.
Good afternoon, Jacob Leva, Secretary of Education.
Thank you. I know there's been some drastic changes and some communication efforts that maybe have not gone where we wanted them to go, so we really appreciate you being here. This meeting is not to blame anybody, state, federal, it's to figure out what's going on and how we can fix the issues. So thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure. Thank you
Go
for
ahead.
having me. And actually thank you for everybody that's here today on different committees to kind of get an update, and even some of our providers who are here in the audience with us today to get just kind of a better understanding on where we are with child care and making sure we define quality and how do we deal with voucher programs and some of those components as it deals with federal investments as well as state investments. So if I could, I'd like just kind of give an overview to give some background knowledge on where we are and why we're having to act with a little bit of sense of urgency, and then maybe talk about some solutions or some next steps. If that sounds fair.
That sounds great. And I think there are some communication, some miscommunication about COVID funds. So when you talk about COVID funds, I think when most people talk about, they think about ARPA funds for COVID. So if you'll talk a little bit about the waivers and how those have been changed, and it's not really ARPA funds, but just explain that a little bit better.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So first thing I like to do is clarify, unlike some of the social media posts, I am a big advocate for early learning, and I'm a big believer in high quality early learning programs. I've spent most of my career supporting education. I'm getting over 25 years, close to 30 years. I started, most of you know, as an elementary school teacher. When I was an elementary school principal, I added early learning programs to my school. When I became a school superintendent, we added early learning programs to all of our elementary schools. So unlike some of the narrative that's been going around, I do want to clarify and advocate for early learning. Since day one, when I've come to this state, that's part of the investment that I've encouraged the legislature, school districts, private providers, communities to rally around. And if we know anything about the research in the studies that we see in that space, there's some studies that say every dollar that you invest in early learning gets about a 9-time return. And when you talk about quality of life, you talk about overall well-being, you talk about students are ready to be successful beyond high school, and also coming to school kindergarten ready. So anything we can do to support any kind of investment, our agency stands willing to work side by side with you to make sure that we can provide high quality learning environments for all of our students and families, and make sure that access becomes a real reality. One of the things I think is important to note too is that the legislature and the state does make some pretty significant investments in early learning. I think the biggest program that most of you are familiar with is the Arkansas Better Chances program. Most people refer to it as ABC. That program serves about 22,850 students currently, and it's about $114 million annual appropriation by the state legislature. Additionally, the state legislature appropriated $22 million for related services for special education students. So that may be in the form of speech, language therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy. But also in this space to help support access to high quality learning environments is there's some federal funds and some federal grants that we receive as a state. And so in 2025, I think some of the biggest grants, and I'm not going to go through all of them, that we need to look at and consider is the Child Care Development Block Grant, which is where we're probably going to have most of our conversation today. But additionally, there is some America Recovery Act, ARA funds that were part of the COVID funds. There's about $2.9 million that went through this fiscal cycle. Also, the state had a preschool development grant, which is around $18.6 million. We also receive a Head Start grant, even though it's not part of our agency, but it's still an investment in early learning, and that's around $110 million. But I think most of the question that we are getting asked about, and we've recently issued some guidance because we're getting ready to go into a new fiscal cycle, which is October 1st. And there's some concerns that we have in regard to the revenue received and the amount of reimbursements that are being paid in the community care, or the Child Care Development Block Grant, the CCDBG grant. So I think it's important for folks to understand what the purpose of that grant is, and then we'll talk to you about where we are and then maybe some ideas for next steps. But that is the main federal law for governing child care programs for low-income working families. And in that law, it identifies 7 broad program purposes. So I just kind of give everybody the same background knowledge. The 7 purposes is it allows states flexibility in developing programs and policies. It promotes parental choice to empower working families. It provides consumer education to families and promote family involvement. It's to help deliver coordinated care to maximize parent options and support independence from public assistance. To improve quality through health, safety, licensing, training, and oversight. Improve child care and development of participating children. Raise the number of and percentage of low-income children in high-quality care. So within those goals, and we look at prioritizing the types of students and families that we want to serve in this program, some of the biggest priority groups include children and families with very low income, children with special needs, children who are experiencing homelessness, and foster care children. So one of the kind of good things about that program is we have more families accessing those opportunities to be in these voucher programs now than we did, even if you go back to pre-COVID levels. In fact, we have about 1,100 student waiting lists that was established in February. Now, it's important to note, because I've seen a lot of misinformation going around on how these funds are allocated or dispersed to states. The CCDBG grant is a formula grant, right? So that comes through the Health and Human Services, Education committees. It comes to us as a state. We take the dollars that we receive from the feds and apply that to a methodology that historically has been aligned with a program called Better Beginnings here in the state of Arkansas, and we disperse that funds. I've been getting asked a lot of questions about, well, you just got a grant to expand charter schools. Why can't you use that money to offset costs and shares in early learning? Why don't you care about early learning? Why do you only care about charter schools? Well, like when you look at examples like the charter school grant, that was a competitive grant. There's a difference between a formula grant that helps fund different programs. So like in K-12, think about Title I, Title II, Title III, Title IV. This is similar, even though it comes through a different agency. But then also the federal government, through their active registry, advertises for competitive grants. And I can tell you that as an agency, anytime we want to apply for a grant that can help make our program stronger, regardless of where they fit on the educational spectrum, it's in our best interest to do that and bring dollars to support our learning community. And if there are competitive grants on early learning, I can promise you we'll be the first ones that have our applications in, because this is something that we want to invest in. and make sure that we keep as a priority. So one of the things that I've been getting asked questions are as we go into October 1, right? So things that we're monitoring at the federal level, one, we don't have a continuing resolution to maintain a budget, right? So there's some very concerns about a budget government shutdown, and these are the funds that we use to reimburse providers at the rates that have been established in the dollars that we allocate to families. But when you look at the current rate of spend and the amount of revenue that we're receiving, it's lopsided. And we knew that we were able to offset some of the spending costs because this grant requires about a 12% set aside for improvement and professional growth and defining quality. And we were able to use some of those COVID ARPA funds to offset some of those grants so that we can maintain a fund balance that we want to carry over as high as we can for reimbursements. One of the things that we didn't know that was going to happen to us is in this last quarter, when we got our allocation and we get quarterly payments, the formula changed and we had an $8 million reduction that wasn't being anticipated for. So that caused us to already go back to and look at the reimbursements rates and say, that's a pretty significant hit. As we're getting ready to go in the next fiscal year, what does that look like? Because we have not gotten our appropriation. We typically, by this time of year, we get what's called a GAN notice, a government anticipation notice, an award. We have not received that yet because Congress is still going through the process of developing their budget. The last I've seen is there's a little bit of a difference in discrepancies between the House and Senate side on what that amount should be, but our feeling is most of the feedback we're getting when it comes to this grant, it'll be level funded. So until we get that award, we don't know if that level funding is going to include an $8 million reduction that we weren't planning on last quarter, moving forward to the next quarter. Another contingency that's factoring into how we support early child care, and we don't know because we don't have a budget yet, is another grant called the Preschool Development Grant, the PDG grant. Last year, that grant for the state of Arkansas was around $18,700,000. Right now, it's not funded on the House side, but it's level funded on the Senate side. Until we get a budget, we can't plan on spending those dollars. So we had to start immediately really looking over the last few weeks because these were short notices, and I think a lot of criticism I'm hearing from providers, and it's very warranted, is that they didn't have a lot of time to plan and make some decisions because we received really short notification that the current revenue and future revenue may look different depending on what our congressional awards are. So we immediately started researching opportunities and things that we can look at to put into place. And one of the things that we needed to look at was the rates that we're reimbursing our providers. Our current rate scale ranged anywhere from, I want to say it was about $39 up to $75. And then also implementing a sliding scale provision for families. Part of even the spirit of the grant is that participating families are expected to contribute to the cost of care on a sliding scale basis. We hadn't really been implementing that for a while or at all. And so one of the things that we wanted to accomplish moving forward into October 1st is establishing a fair sliding scale that would make sure we prioritized our families and greatest needs so that they wouldn't have a copay, especially if they were under 45% of the state median income, all the way up to the 85% state median income, which is part of the threshold for qualifying for that grant, so that the co-payments would be typically around 4% of what the reimbursement rate is. So as we've been rolling this out, we've talked with our local leads. I've heard from several providers. I'm sure you've heard from several providers as well. And so some of the things that, the feedback that I definitely hear pretty consistently is that they would like to have a little bit more time, right, to figure this out, that this kind of sprung on them pretty quickly, and they want to make sure, like, if we have to make adjustments, that they can do that with due diligence. And one of the concerns that I've been sharing with them, and I've been sharing with legislators, is without knowing what our future appropriations is every week that we put a pause, we have to look at the fund balance that we have in our grant, not knowing when the next award is going to be. We can't make allocations for programs for revenue and dollars that we don't receive. So we know that this has been quite a change and quite a lot to happen and digest in a very short amount of time. But as I stated, I've been meeting with a lot of folks in this space. In fact, I had a great meeting with about 8 providers earlier today before we came in to sit down at the table and say, how do we make this palatable, right? And I think what's great about our field is that they understand that if we have to make changes, they just want to be a thought partner and have a seat at the table and be a part of the process. And I can tell you from our agency is we want to do everything we can to mitigate like any changes to levels of service for students and families. And we don't want to do anything that's detrimental, that'll cause great undue hardships overnight. So one of the biggest assets that we have received continuously is like, can we just pause for like 30 days before the new rates go into place and the reimbursement rates go into place, and get a better understanding, because they're under contracts, they have employees, they have budgetary concerns as well. And is that something we can consider? And so we've kind of gone back and looked at current payment rates, and one of the proposals I think that we could look at is one thing that we do need to do is start implementing the sliding scale for families, and my recommendation is to keep that on track to go forward with an October implementation. We've been notifying families, we've been notifying providers, but if we pause for 30 days or went to November 1st on reimbursement rates and get kind of a really good working group around here to maybe come up with some better ideas, I think we can do that and make that happen, depending on what happens at the federal level. Hopefully all of those budgetary discussions get resolved and across the finish line, and we can get the appropriations to make it. But what I can assure you is, as I've met with everybody, the current model that we have is unsustainable. When we look at the current ways that we have a wide range of reimbursements, we can't keep funding at that level unless the state or somebody else makes a significant contribution. So right now, if we just said, well, what if we want to leave everything alone and leave it all the same? It's probably about $80 million a year that we would need to invest as a state. So that's the conversation that y'all would need to have. Obviously, I don't have the authority to make those kinds of decisions, but I do think there's some strategies we can implement, such as the sliding scale that should be implemented. Less than 5% of our families were given anything on a co-payment, and then continue to work with providers to come up with a reimbursement rate that recognizes quality, that gives providers an aspiration towards improvement, is something that we are willing to continue to do so that we can get this right.
Before we go on, could you just talk a little bit about the amount of money that has been withheld and what the gap is and how that's different?
Sure. So if you look at the fiscal year 24 allocation, for the CCDF allocation, it was, and I hope it's okay if I round a little bit, it was about $137 million in 24. That's the amount of allocation that we received in 25, and then we were notified last quarter that that allocation was reduced to 127. So if we're looking at level funding moving forward, we have to plan for that to be 127, because that's kind of where it left off, and that's what we're expecting. And then, Chair, if I could also, I think part of that was in 24, we received $9.6 million in the preschool development grant, which is what we received in 25, which would be scheduled to sunset in December, and we don't know if that's going to be picked up in the legislative appropriation for next coming school year or not.
But as of now, the CCDBG and the PG.
PDG. There's a lot of fun acronyms.
There are, and actually I do want to let you know that I did put some acronyms on the table for the members. I know there's a lot. I thought there were a lot of medicine until I got into education. But anyway, there are some acronyms, and they're not nearly all of them. So if you don't mind, just kind of make sure that we get that when you're talking. But anyway, the right now, those two grants are level, right? And so
No, ma'am. And that's why I want to be
At
clear.
least in the Senate.
Correct, but it's not in the House, and that's why that's why we have to be very realistic and cautious about building a budget, because we don't know what it's going to be.
It's actually the nutrition that's been cut completely, right? And the college program, those two were cut. The parents, the student parents.
Yeah, and I don't know how much we received as a state in that one, because that was a pretty small allocation at the federal level. I want to say it was like a $75 million federal allocation nationally. So. Are you talking about the child care access means parents in school?
Yes.
Grant, yeah. That one had a $75 million national funding level, so I don't really know how much, if we got any as a state.
That's in Northwest Arkansas, but.
Yeah, so it's probably a small amount. But we don't know, like they're still negotiating through Congress.
Okay, great. Okay, members, questions? Representative McKenzie.
Thank you, Chair. So, Secretary Leva, appreciate the time today. Two questions really come to mind. There's a lot of subject matter here, and it's important. It's a good conversation to have, and I'm sure a lot of providers like us to talk in a more fulsome way. Two things that come to mind. One, since we spoke about this subject previously, was a call I received from a provider in Northwest Arkansas relative to direction they received regarding an authorization form for the new reimbursement rate that's going to take effect October 1. And that they can then now go and apply the differential copay amount to parents to make up for that stopgap that does exist. But they still need an authorization form in order to fill it out per student to figure out what that differential is. That they need that, I believe, by my information today, was they need that form filled out, complete, submitted back to OCE or AE tomorrow, the beginning of the new fiscal calendar for you guys, but they still haven't received that form yet. So before we go any further, have you, maybe some folks back there at AE can help us understand, or if that's a federal limitation, how we can go ahead and facilitate providers getting that authorization form so that they can start to track on the out-of-pocket that parents will have to make up.
Yeah, so thank you for the question. I think that's part of the work that we're working on to make sure we get that transition, which is why I think we're looking at, if we had to do a quick little pause for implementation, it might give us a little time to work that out. But we need to know moving forward that there's some real great concerns about the spending levels. So without a significant investment, we're not going to be able to continue operating the way we always have.
Understood. Okay. In that same vein, I'd love to have a better context. You've done a good job of eliminating, I think a lot of us have been hit with questions and emails, and then some of the ad hominem about, well, money in this bucket versus money in this bucket. And we all know education dollars aren't created equal because they come from different revenue sources. But can you help me understand the population of those that have been drawing down SRA benefits? Because I think based on what an AI summary told me, that in 2007 is when the CCDF as well as the PDG really began in earnest. We enacted legislation in 2008, and then from there ADs promulgated rules. Can you help me understand the population? So like any other entitlement, and I'm not trying to lead the witness here, but like any other entitlement, sustainability of these programs is really dependent on the size, the eligibility, and the accountability on the back end. So if we know on an apples-to-apples basis that in 2008 this served 6,000 kids and now it serves over 24,000 kids, we can help illustrate the strain by the pure number of applicants and people on the program.
Yes, I want to say, if I could read my own handwriting, because sometimes I can't tell if this is a 9 or a 3, but prior to 2019 to today, we're serving about 9,000 more students.
Okay, that's rough numbers, but appreciate that. To that end, and the conversation I had today with a great provider who's feeling the effects of this, or will feel the effects of this, goes into a a lot of the basis of this, and I think we both understand, as well as anyone that's on this subcommittee or in a greater committee, that in education we work on these policies and specifically the money in a proactive way. Adequacy takes 2 years. It's a very long, arduous, and important process. This one seems a bit, we're reacting. And that's okay because, like you mentioned, there are some dependencies that are outside of our control. I'd love to understand, in your opinion, and again, Chairman Gardner did a great job. It's not point fingers. We're just trying to figure out problems arise. How do we create solutions that benefit everybody and not create too much disruption? In your opinion, what happened? How did we get to this point where, besides the federal government doing what the federal government does, which is wait and delay and defer, did we get to this place where we're kind of having to make quick action within 2 weeks and then possibly uphold?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. One of the goals I think we've all had is that we want to increase access and eliminate deserts and islands and make sure that every family that wants to participate in high quality childcare can. And if you can qualify for this grant or this program or this voucher or something else, we want to help you do that. As we've brought in more families, the pot of money hasn't grown, and as we've increased quality and we're paying for reimbursements at a tiered level per rate, it's a good problem to have in the sense that we're increasing quality and we're increasing access, but it required us to create a waiting list. If I could go back in hindsight, because we knew that the amount of seats that were going to be available were becoming limited, when we established that waiting list in February, that waiting list didn't slow down the spending as much as we had hoped or anticipated, but we were still monitoring it, but we weren't planning on getting a federal reduction, right, like at the last minute. So we knew that there was going to have to be some adjustments made. If we could have went back in time in February and started implementing the copay based on a sliding scale back then, it would have offset the speed of spending and started getting these programs in line with where payments met the revenue. And part of the challenges that we have today, which is why this is going so fast, is because October 1st is the next fiscal year. And as we've been receiving federal allocations, whether they're forward funded or current funded, and this program is current year funded, when we're looking at the reductions that we've received, not knowing what the legislature or Congress is going to vote on and approve and sign into law, we have to make plans based on the revenue that we can strongly predict, and that's where these decisions were made.
One more. Thank you. So I'd love to know, and this may be something you don't have access to, but again, like I mentioned earlier, in entitlement programs, it's important to create a program that has long-term sustainability. Do you have any access to information, or is it something that's percolated up to ADE or OCE relative to the percent of parents who draw an SRA that do pay a copay? Because through some of my research and preparation for this committee meeting, there's some facilities that just don't. They just don't collect it. Because the math and the admin time that goes into figuring out what the percentage of the differential you're allowed to apply is either nominal or it's hard to extract that money, and we all know that people that have owned or operate businesses, chasing that money can be more of an investment of your time. But I'd love to know how much of the burden share is actually happening with SRA applicants and families that drop down.
Currently, the number that was shared with me is less than 5% of the families have a copay right now.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Latitude.
Okay, thank you. Representative Bach.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So you said less than 5% have a copay right now. So what is their copay as of right now, and what will the new copay be?
Well, many of the recommendations with the copays, and let me see if I have it here in front of me, is to make sure that students that are in the greatest needs don't have to have a copay. So if you're below the 40% of the state median income, and it's kind of a nuanced question because it also depends on if you have an infant, a toddler, and after-school care, so it varies a little bit. But for just kind of overall perspective, if you are less than 40% of the state medium income, that you would still maintain a $0 copay. If you're between 40 and 60%, and I'll use toddler, a full-time toddler for example, the copay recommendation is $6.95. And then if you're greater than 60%, it was $10.43, which is about 4% of what the recommendation is for the family wage. The feds say you can go up to 7%, but these were set at 4%.
Okay. May I ask another, ma'am? Thank you, ma'am. So I think we would all agree 0 to 5 is one of the most important stages of education that there is, correct?
Correct.
I know that some went to a meeting this past weekend, SREB, and I want to say Hunt Institute, where no other state was talking about this. And we're the only state talking about this. So I want to know why we are the only state who's talking about these cuts when we know 0 to 5 is the most important time for education to take place. I know that I personally had one daughter who was about to have her 3rd child. It was too expensive for her to actually work, and we want people in this state to work, so we have to find a way for them to have care while a parent is working, right? So my question is, I don't understand why we're the only state talking
so
about this.
we're not, and I don't know why they're telling you that, because I've been talking to a lot of other states.
Can you tell me where those states are?
Indiana, for one, had an allocation readjustment based on their federal guidelines that I know for a fact. And when you keep saying we're talking about cuts, right? Like, we get so much money from the federal government that we redistribute. And what we started making recommendations around reimbursement rates, whether they're the right ones or the wrong ones. I'm not disagreeing with you about the early learning investments. What we're talking about, you want to compare us to other states. If you look at our proposed rate for infants, and I'll just look at infants, our proposed reimbursement rate is $36.11. Missouri's, who touches us, $24.50. Oklahoma, who touches us, $20. Tennessee, who touches us, $34. Texas, who touches us, $31.80. So our recommendations is still well below the federal recommendations for a sliding pay scale, which is significantly higher than the states that surround us, so that we can do that. Exactly what you're saying is keep that high quality investment, but make sure that this program is sustainable. Because the last thing I want to do is set up a reimbursement rate that at Christmas we got to call everybody and say, we're done, we spent all our money.
And I can understand that. So, but again, we do know this is the most vulnerable group. And again, Southern Regional Education Board, where they were talking about this exact thing, there was no state in the Southern region who was talking about this.
And I can't speak for what they're telling you, but if you just Google funding cliff and early learning, this has been written about for several years, and states have been grappling with this for several years, because we got a large amount of money during COVID to incentivize providers to open. And we did that. The state did a wonderful job. They said, you're the most important people to us. We want to give you the most amount of dollars that we can. And we established rates that did that. That $60 million has all been obligated. So we can't keep maintaining that level of payment if the revenue doesn't match it. What I'm telling you is I made recommendations based on the federal appropriation we see. If the state wants to make a state recommendation or appropriation, we're willing to roll up our sleeves and help make that happen. But I can't make a federal pot of money increase when I have no control over it.
And I understand that. I know you're getting aggravated. I'm not going at you. I'm not going at you. It's
but when
an
you're
issue.
saying that no other state is dealing with this, that's not true.
But I'm sorry. At SREB, no other state brought it up.
Well, maybe that's why I don't
We
go
were
to
the
the
only
meeting.
state who brought it up. So that is a red flag for me when no one else is bringing it up. And I'm not going at you again.
Sure.
Again, I believe this is the most important years of children. And if we want to read on the 3rd grade level, this is a very important need that we need to figure out how to sustain. And I do believe it has to be sustainable. I'm very conservative whenever it comes to money, so I totally get what you're saying, but I also would like for us to figure out some way to help these providers. Thank you, Madam.
Sure.
Thank you. Representative Mayberry.
Hello, thank you, Madam Chair. I've got quite a few questions, but I'm going to try to give just a few and then get back in the queue. I'm perplexed with why we did not have to promulgate rules for this significant of a change. Can you help me understand why we aren't going through a rules change when we're going through such a drastic change on how we're funding this program and how we're looking at this? Can you explain that?
It's a federal program, not a state program.
Okay, but it's still run through our state and we have rules governing the Arkansas Better Chance program.
Which is a state
This money goes through, so.
And that's why I'm trying to make sure we understand, like, the ABC program that we have rules around is a state-funded program. And if the legislature wants to invest in that state program, which I don't think has had an investment increase in quite some time from what I'm being told, if we want to expand, raise payments, raise quality, do all those things, that's a state program. We're willing to help work with you and make that happen. That's up to this legislative delegation. What you're speaking about is a federal allocation that they have on a formula that we redistribute as a state agency because we're in charge of distributing that federal allocation. It's not a state program.
Okay, so in the past, we've been paying based on the level of care that the daycare is providing, that the early childhood center is providing. I absolutely love that. We want to increase the quality of that care. Actually, one of the things that I absolutely loved about the LEARNS Act is that we moved early childhood education from DHS and moved it over to the Department of Education because I felt like, okay, this is a great step forward that we're seeing these years as really very important years, the pipeline to reading by 3rd grade and all that. And so it was set up to allow those early childhood learning centers who were providing that extra step, whether that's, all the different levels that are there and all the different things that they have to meet to get to that higher level. And now it's a flat rate. So when did that idea come up? Because I can't imagine that just suddenly came up in the last week or two based on the information that you can easily find online now about what you're doing. So this must have been some idea that internally has been discussed, but perhaps externally has not been discussed, and that's why you have all these folks sitting here going, where did this idea come from?
Yeah, and I think that's a fair question. And this came from, we had to look at what our federal allocation was, still not knowing what next allocation is going to be, but using our best prediction, and had to reduce about $6 million a month in allocations of spendings that we're not receiving revenue for. So yeah, this was a big deal. It hit us fast, but when you're spending $6 million more a month than you receive, and you have a new federal fiscal year starting with not enough fund balance to make it through a month, you have to do something drastic. So do we want to do a quality indicator and a tier and recognize for service and support? 1,000%. I think we're all on the same page here. I know like a lot of people are frustrated. This is a federal allocation. If we want to make a state investment, then we need to talk about that. But I can't control the allocation that we get in a formula. But I also know that I can't start making payments that are $6 million more a month than I have in that grant, because by Christmas, when you think we're upset now and I tell everybody we spent all of our year's allocation, you all are closed, you're definitely getting those calls too. And I do want to remind this legislature that this is one grant, and we don't have a budget for a lot of federal grants that cover a lot of things to do with education that we need to stay on top of to make sure, because I think there's more deeper conversations coming.
So again, kind of following up to ask, when did this idea come up? Because the idea has been, a sliding scale that a level 3 would be compensated differently than a level 4 and a level 5.
Right.
So when did that conversation happen?
About 3 weeks
within-
ago.
3 weeks ago. That idea was never brought up before
No,
that.
because we don't have enough money to keep paying for a system that's not generating the revenue it gets. So we had to model out, and we looked at what neighboring states are. We looked at what a sliding scale is going to be. We looked at what we can do to help prioritize the needs of our providers while serving the most students and families that we can. It started with a rate. And that's why even in our guidance, we said we're going to build out a tiered quality as we move forward. But we have to reduce the amount of dollars going out the door than are coming in. Fingers crossed, Congress gets things across the finish line, grants are restored, things get better where they need. I can go back to the field and say, good news. We got more than we projected. But when you're projecting like a low amount, and we can't keep sustaining that at the point, because we're not allowed to run a negative balance. We're not Congress, right? Like, we have to present level balanced budgets, and I know it's painful and it's not fun, but I think when I talk to the field, they understand that there's probably some adjustments that need to be made. They've asked, like, can we just not do this so quickly? Can we have about 30 days to help process? Let us work with you. Let us look at these amounts. Let us define quality. I'm willing to do that. But I'm willing to do that to make sure this legislature knows that if this government shuts down for another 3 weeks, there's no money to pay these people at all.
Okay. Well, but also going back, so let's just say 3 weeks ago, this is when the idea came up with you and you all became aware of the situation. Was there any phone call or meeting to people who this might greatly affect and say, hey, this is what we're being told. We want to come up with some ideas.
Yeah.
Was there any effort to involve the stakeholders in trying to come up with a solution instead of finding out in 7 days, this is the solution, no ifs, ands, or buts? And I think that's where there's a lot of frustration
Which
in
is
the
why I'm
situation
publicly
that's going on.
saying, I hate that we're here. I didn't ask for this. I don't disagree. Do we want to be transparent? Yes. Are there things we can look in the rear view mirror and say, I wish I would have done it differently? Which is why we say the windshield's this big, the rear view mirror is this big. These folks want to come to the table and have that conversation. But when you're under the gun to have an October 1 budget, it's hard to get a lot of input. So did we meet with local providers? Did we talk to our team? Did we look at other states? Did we ask as many people as we could? Yes. Is this the perfect solution? No. I'm not disagreeing. But we have to do something.
I'll let someone else ask questions. Thank you.
Representative Painter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Secretary Lee, I appreciate you being here today. I know we've thrown some numbers and different things out there. What is the exact amount of dollars that the gap is that of decrease in funding?
It's right now, when we look at our current spend rate and our projected revenue, it's about $6 to $8 million a month. And it's hard to give you an exact number because it depends on days of reimbursement and how the different categories factor in, but it could be somewhere around $80 million a year.
Gotcha. And sorry for my lack of knowledge in this area, but those co-pays are paid every day, correct?
Well, I don't know.
Or not paid every day, but that amount is every day.
Correct.
Factored in every day.
Yeah.
And I think you mentioned earlier too, and I appreciate you saying we're not like Congress, and I'm very thankful that we're not like Congress and can run up a debt we can't afford. But you said you might take a pause for 30 days. What does that look like, and what does that look like for our providers? Because when I think of a pause, that's a little concerning if I was in their shoes.
Right.
About
But
that.
I think the providers, and they've been not afraid to share their opinions, said, can we not implement this October 1? Like, can we pause on the implementation of the new rates or reimbursement rates till November 1st? Let's just say 30 days, rounding numbers. And I feel like we can, but what we can't pause on is starting to implement the copay. We have to start reducing spending in this grant. And if we can still reimburse the providers at their current rates while we come up with maybe a different methodology while starting to implement the sliding scale, we should be able to have enough fund balance to get us through that next month or hopefully through the next quarter if we can get an allocation or a continuing resolution signed and across the finish line.
Do you, Secretary, anticipate maybe some future more allocations from the state in this area?
Well, I think that's the conversation we should have. I mean,
Just based off what things are going on at the federal level?
Yeah, if this is the standard that we want to provide as a state, right? So let's say, like Representative Mayberry says, we love these tiered services, we want to pay for these tiered services and these qualities at the current level that we're paying right now, keeping everything in place. Well, we need to invest as a state, yes. And it's going to probably be about $80 million a year.
Okay. And just 80 million, is that correct?
That's a rough number,
Right.
right? I'm just giving you
Right.
that's why I say it's hard to calculate because the reimbursements are different, but if the state wants to make that investment, they can, and I will remind folks that this is a federal grant, so the state has an investment in this federal grant, it's around $10 million, right? If we increase that means we got to do that in perpetuity because the maintenance effort for a federal grant would supplement and supplant. The state also has an ABC fund, that's a state program, that's $114 million. If you want to build that out, maybe make an ABC 2.0, look at reimbursement rates, look at tiered quality, invest in a state program, access quality, we could do that too.
Right. I appreciate that, Madam Chair, and I just want to reiterate for the record that you're looking at doing a pause till November 1st with the current rates.
Yeah, make sure I always state that in the right way.
Yeah.
What we're looking at is not changing the reimbursement rates to providers for about 30 days so that we can get them a little bit more comfortable. They are businesses too, and they have contracts, they have payroll. They have been very clear, like, I feel for the most part, they understand the need to make some adjustments to this program. They just need a little more time and want to have more voice to help make those adjustments, and we're willing to do that. I do think we need to start implementing the sliding scale for co-pays for families because we can't just pause this program. We'll run out of money by the end of the month.
Right. No, I appreciate that. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the grace and those questions.
Thank you. And I just wanted to clarify a little bit about the parent copay for October 1st. So if you're saying that we're going to take a we could take a 30-minute or 30-day pause, how are we working the copays for the parents? We're talking to parents still that don't have any idea that this is happening or what's going to happen. So
well, and that's where we would have to provide additional support to the providers and communicate with the parents. Like I said, if you're under 40% of the threshold, there's not a copay. 40 to 60%, there's a little bit of a copay. Above that, it's a little bit more. If we stay the status quo and don't get a congressional delegation, there will be no money in this pot to give providers.
I get that. I do understand that. I'm just a little bit concerned, a whole lot concerned actually, that we've given less than a pay period to these parents to figure out how they're going to pay for childcare.
Right. And that's why I'm saying.
With a copay that goes up by October 1st.
And I want to work with the providers. I want to work with this delegation. What I'm telling you is if we don't do something, this pot of money will not have any money in it, and somebody's going to have to fill this pot of money with money from somewhere else. And I don't have the authority to do that.
Representative Brooks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Secretary Lee, thank you for being here and all the information. Also want to thank all the providers and initiative partners for being here as well. I know that it takes a lot to step away from a day of work, and so appreciate everybody. So a couple of questions, probably general follow-up on some that have already been asked, just to re-clarify the re-clarification from Representative Painter. So the pause of 30 days, we have the money in the pot for the pause of 30 days to continue provider payments.
As long as we don't have a long-term congressional shutdown at the federal level, we should get our next quarterly payment if they sign a continuing resolution that would help fill in that gap.
Okay. Because obviously, I think this is, the primary issue is businesses have payrolls and families have budgets, and that's what we're trying to all wrap our minds around. So when it comes to, so two more questions, Madam Chair. When it comes to the communication, I know we've, this runway has been very short in terms of communications to providers and families. What has the communication been to providers specifically, and as well as families, letting them know what the change is? And what will that look like? If we haven't done it as comprehensively as we need to, what will that look like in coming days to make sure everyone is very aware of what's going on?
And we can continue doing a better job of communication, but we did host a couple webinars for providers, and as some providers weren't able to do that, we sent them, everybody in our system, some emails and follow-ups that included sample letters that they could share with families. They could tailor it to however they wanted to help provide that information.
Okay, so the providers would be expected to communicate to the individual families.
That would probably be the best line of communication.
And so we've talked a lot about the different tiers, the 6 different tiers within our system. Can you give just a little bit of a background as to what, and you may have already said this, and I apologize if I missed it, but what the different tiers are and what the difference is in those relative to reimbursement as well as relative to a quality discussion of those tiers?
Yes, I don't know if I have the current tier system with me, but I know like for early childcare, it could range based on the lowest level from about $39 per day all the way up to $75 per day based on the quality index.
And do you know what, and if we don't have information, Madam Chair, if we could just request maybe get that from staff up to the members, but do you know what those different tiers represent from a quality standpoint in terms of the recognition of different reimbursement levels?
Yeah, I mean, some of it looks at an instrument on how the program's been evaluated using the environmental rating scale. I think when you get to the higher tier, it also looks at ratios, which is why they're reimbursed a little bit at a higher level. So it looks at those different factors. There isn't as many level 6s that are at that upper level, but I think where you see a lot of our providers are on that 3 or 4 index.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Secretary Leva, thank you for being here today. Could you just sort of from a 30,000-foot view tell me the difference or if there's an overlap between the program we're discussing, the federal program we're discussing today and the ABC program?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say there's really that much of an overlap. I mean, maybe some of the criteria for qualification if a student or family might want to participate, but the ABC is a state-funded program. It sets a daily rate. It currently serves about 22,847 students, and it's a flat rate of 5105, and it's required to have 178 days of instruction, which is about $28 a day for reimbursement. But then there's also I want to say about a 40% in-kind match, which is why you see mostly schools doing that, because they can provide space and power and furniture and electricity as the in-kind match. Where the CC DF funds is a federal allocation.
Thank you. And so they both serve the same age group?
Well, ABC, I believe, was recently expanded from birth to 5. It used to primarily be 3 to 4 to 5-year-olds, but it was just recently expanded.
And the CCDF?
Well, it goes all the way up to, I want to say age 13 is a qualifying age, but from birth, you can qualify all the way up to age 13.
Thank you.
And did you say how the parents were notified of the rate changes?
Well, we sent sample letters to providers to share with families. I don't know if we have direct access to all their information. Oh, and they sent an email to every family as well.
So you sent an email to every family and then
If it was in our kid care system, they received an email. If they're not in our care system, they don't have it.
point of order. If the audience will hang in there with us, we'll get some answers to these questions. Thank you. Okay, so you sent an email to the families that you have information
If they're
on,
in the kid care system.
and then sent the information to the providers
Yes, ma'am.
to make sure that they could tell the families.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and they were notified that they needed to tell the families.
They were given a sample letter they could even share with families.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Representative Magruder.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Secretary Oliva and your staff. We really appreciate all the work that you all are doing. I'm hearing everything that you're saying. It seems as if you're trying your best to lay down on the sword in this situation because this is a federal government situation. But lack of a better phrase, I would trust Dracula the blood drive before I could trust what the federal government is doing right now. We are truly suffering, and this is an issue that we must address. I've done the numbers. 1,306 total kids on our wait list. 29% of these centers that are being affected about this are in Senator Murdoch's district, and this is a real concern. What can we do to stop situations like this happening? Because I'm a father of 6. My children were a part of the ABC program. I loved it, but I was part of that 5% that had to make a payment. So there were days when I was dodging the provider because I didn't have the money to pay it because I was a young man who didn't just have the funds. And I know working on a budget is very difficult. And this is very hard for the families who are experiencing this right now. And I know it's fright. I know they're worried because your children depend on you. We are elected by a group of 30,000 people. And I know the audience wants to make comments, but you need to be reaching out to your legislators right now so they can make comments for you. You need to know exactly who represents you in your area. I thank you for laying on the sword, but my question to you and my question to us all, what can we do to help in this situation? Because I don't want these families suffering, because thank God my baby is 16 years old and I don't have to deal with child care, but I will have grandchildren, and everybody isn't financially stable enough to pay $300 for child care, or even the $50 that they're asking for per week. It's a bad issue for people to be facing right now, especially people in the low socioeconomic background. And this is why ABC is designed for children from 0 to 5, which was created in 1991, to have the education background before they get to school. So I just want to know what we can do to help alleviate some of this stress. I thank God that we're holding over till November the 1st if possible, but I know that's right around the holiday season, and everybody's going to be pinching pennies during that time to making sure they can get something done. So what can we do as a body? Do we need to be reaching out to our U.S. representatives or what?
I don't think that would hurt. I mean, and that's why I go back to, there's a different funding recommendation on the House side than the Senate side. I think the Senate side may be a little bit more favorable to the folks that are in this room, to reach out to them and encourage them to adopt the Senate proposal would be a little bit more funds back into this program. But then also go back to, as a state, like you're referencing ABC, which is a state-funded early learning program. If this is the quality of care that the state wants to provide for all the students and families, then it's going to take a significant state investment, because I don't know if we can rely on a federal allocation to make sure that you can maintain the program the way it is. Right now, with the allocation we're projected to receive, it can't maintain that same level of service without a state investment.
Thank you, and I believe he's correct as far as the state investment, and we have him doing so many different jobs right now. And everything we're handing over to the Arkansas Department of Education, they can't continue managing all this. I'm speaking for them. He hasn't shared that with me, but we got to figure out something here at the state level to help out.
Okay, Representative Steele.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair. My first question, just a couple, but my first question is along the lines of Representative Mayberry, so it won't take long at all. The question, I'm going to ask to when did you see this coming? She actually covered quite a bit of that, but my question's a little different. It's more along the lines of you're a person that's here in this chamber just about as much as we are. My question is, why didn't you let us know before the decision was made? I think there was an extensive presentation by you a week ago, and we talked about education, the future of education. Absolutely no mention of this situation. The way I found out about it was from my constituents. I'm the elected one, and should maybe be the other way around. we're informed. But my question is, why not come to us before you make the decision so that we can have this type of dialogue and maybe come up with a solution to this problem?
Sure. I think that's fair feedback, and I think the reason why this happened so quickly is because when we started getting a handle on these allocations, we knew we had to make quick decisions and act with urgency, because we wanted to give people as much information and time that they knew, or so that they would know. But as this stuff comes forward, I'm more than willing to involve any stakeholders. We meet with lots of different committees, lots of different legislators. So we want to, if we need to do better at that, we can do that.
Yeah, well, my question is, why not tell us as legislators first, so we would better be able to respond to our constituents when something like this happens?
Yeah, and I meet with a lot of legislators. I don't meet with every single one, but we have been meeting with key legislators as well. We probably could do a better job giving you more information so that you're better informed on the front end.
Let me also ask you about the quality of care, evaluation, reimbursement process. Mr. Secretary, would you agree that quality of care sometimes costs resources?
Yeah, and I think we've had that discussion. If we can come up with a way to recognize quality of care and incentivize providers to provide more opportunities and better serve their students, then we should recognize them for that.
But in the reimbursement process, as it is now, before you change it, the reimbursement process already has built in different reimbursements based on the number they receive from the evaluation. Is that correct?
Under the Better Beginning scales of
Yes.
Chapter 6, yes, sir.
Okay, so with that quality of care reference, some of these individuals who own these child care centers have invested resources to get better trained people, higher educated people, so that they can provide the quality of care that our children deserve. So they've already made that investment. So how do now, in a short period of time, they go back?
Yeah. Like I said, I'm not disagreeing with you. What I'm telling you is we can't continue to pay for that quality of care under the amount of dollars we receive. So if the state wants to make an investment, we can go back, work with these providers, get this across the finish line. The federal appropriation that we receive could no longer sustain that level.
I understand that. But this process, this legislative process, which if we would have known this train was coming a little sooner, or if we would have been informed a little sooner, there could have been an opportunity where we could have done things a little differently, even including the governor's office in this. There is something called a special session there, and I'm not advocating for that, but I'm just saying when we as decision makers come together and discuss and dialogue, it's amazing sometimes what we can do. But what we find out after the fact, and it's already done, it's much more difficult to go back and undo something. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Representative Collins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. So there have been different ideas, thrown out here about communication and about maybe moving things a little bit, delaying them. I think my personal preference would be to not make these changes. And to do that, I understand we may need to backfill some money that won't be coming from the feds. You said $80 million. I realize that's not an exact figure. But $80 million, are you saying that that is what has been cut from the federal allocation that we have? And just so I am clear, are you saying that that is all the CCDBG money that is being cut?
Yeah, so there's a couple programs that I've talked about that have been maybe reduced a little bit, which is the CCD allocation. We don't know what the preschool development grant is going to be, which is around 18.6. And the reason it's 80 million is because we've been building off a fund balance to make these reimbursements rates that we were able to as we looked at the sunsetting of COVID dollars and paying some grants off, we were able to use these grants or these funds to build up a fund balance, which is why we're able to continue these payments. We knew that this fund balance was going to start replenishing, which is why we put in the wait list in February. It didn't have the impact probably as quick as it should. Like I said, if I could have gone back in time, I probably would have started implementing the copay on a sliding scale, or recommended that in February to slow down the spending. But the spending at our current rate is going to leave about an $80 million deficit this next fiscal year.
Okay, so, as we, I think have all agreed, it's unlikely that this won't be reauthorized, and it may be reauthorized at a flat rate. I'm talking about the CCDBG fund. So you're saying that $80 million was our burn rate from that COVID money, that we were spending down a balance at the rate of $80 million a year?
Currently, if this is what I go back to, we're spending about $6 to $8 million a month than we receive. So if I take the amount of money we receive and then look at the additional dollars that we've been putting towards it, it's about $6 to $8 million a month, which is why we've got to slow down that spending, which is why we added a wait list.
So it's really not what's been going on at the federal level, it's what is running out from, I guess in some way it's federal money, but you're saying it's 100% of that 80 million, whatever it is, $6 to $8 million a month, is COVID spent?
Not 100%.
Okay.
Because about $30 million was part of a reduction as well. So it's a combination of both storms hitting us together at the same time.
And what's the $30 million reduction?
We got a reduction in Q4 on the CCDF grant, and we still don't know about the future of the preschool development grant.
And how can you break out what's what there? What's CCDF and what's preschool development? And so when you say $30 million, can you separate out those two?
Yeah,
I just want to know where
so
the $30 million is.
We received, our fiscal award for 25 was about $136.5 million in CCDF. We got a Q4 notification that the formula was updated. We actually received about $127.5 million. So round off about $8 million or so. If that's carried forward to next year, that's $16 million. The PDG grant was funded at $18,670,000. That's sunsets in December. If that's not reauthorized in this budget, that's another reduction that we don't know if it's going to happen or not.
And do we have confidence that that's not going to be reauthorized, or a reasonable belief that it's not?
Well, it's not in the House budget, but it is in the Senate budget. But this is why we don't know, right? We don't have a continuing resolution, and we don't have our next fiscal year budget. We have not received the GAN award. And that's, I think, is important for folks to know, because typically by this time of year, we get our government anticipation notification award on this is what you should be expected to receive. We have not received that. Our fiscal year starts tomorrow.
Okay. So just so I'm clear then, so the $8 million sounds like that's from the CCDF.
Mm-hmm.
18 million you're saying may not be reauthorized, it may be reauthorized. If it is reauthorized, by the way, and we have made these changes, where does that money go?
I think that's where we can go back to the providers and say, we've gotten some more dollars than we had planned for, and this is where we can look at those tiers of quality, look at reimbursement rates, look at reducing co-pays. I think it gives you some more dollars to be flexible with.
Okay, and you put the 2 years of the 8 together, so that's where you get the 30. So were you saying that you were spending $50 million then in the COVID money?
I don't know the exact number, but it was pretty significant, yeah.
Okay, but I'm just trying to dig down a little bit deeper to know, because again, my view, my belief, maybe not everyone's belief, is this is where we ought to be, is where we currently are, not making these changes, finding the money. So if we're finding 50 million versus 80 million versus 40 million or 30 million, those are very different things.
Sure.
And we have to make those decisions as a body.
And that's why I think it will help when we get our next fiscal budget from our congressional delegation, because they could change that number.
Okay, and the last thing, thank you for the latitude, is a lot of these providers have done a lot of things in reliance on the current system as it's been set up. They've made investments to set up things in the way they've done it. So, I would definitely feel more comfortable leaving things as they are
part of the understanding when you take a federal allocation, especially when it's a formula. It's not an entitlement, it's not a guarantee, it's dependent on the next fiscal year appropriation.
Right. And I know we understand that, but have we done things to make sure that they understand that?
That's part of the agreement when they accept the funds.
Okay. I'm just as, again, feedback as we go in the future with these, if there's a way to make sure to help drive that point home that these federal funds are potentially temporary and could go away, because it sounds like to me that potentially we've created a dependency here and caused us, got us to where we're at. So just some feedback to maybe try to help prevent these kind of things happening in the future. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative McKenzie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I mentioned it earlier, we talked about entitlement programs. I'd love to understand better from you or someone else the eligibility requirements. So, if we talk about sustainability of this program and having to umbuds against federal government, lack of responsibility, dereliction of duty from funding programs on a continual basis, then it's incumbent upon us. There's a lot of talk, a lot of speech here today about how can we let this happen? Well, we all did. We all had an entire legislative session where we could have backfilled or paid more for ABC, and none of us filed that bill. But I do want to take a moment and say, if the work needs to start today, what needs to happen? What eligibility requirements are we required to, from a federal standpoint, adhere to? And then what can we go in and say, yes, this should be reserved and it should be totally sustainable for those who need it most amongst our community. So what limitations do we have to go in and look at this under the hood and say, those parents that are at less than 150% of the federal poverty limit, which I know from obviously in the education committee we understand that really well with the free and reduced lunch rates. What can we do to facilitate making this program sustainable in the future?
Yeah, so I think we do have a little bit of latitude on defining priorities if you're looking at defining access. And typically when you look at kind of priority one of guaranteed funding, you want to serve all of the families that have foster care children, that are TANF eligible, that are homeless, special education. And then when you start getting into different priorities, that's where you can look at, do you want to emphasize infant and child care? Do you want to emphasize pre-K? Do you want 40% of the state median index, under 65%? That's where you can start sending those tiers. Like teen moms is something that typically you would want to prioritize as a state. But we can determine how many families qualify. They come up for an annual eligibility. These recommendations were so that we would protect all the families that were already in a program and not have to kick anybody out in the middle of a cycle.
Thank you very much.
Representative Mayberry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you, because this really hasn't been brought up in other conversation, and I realize that the more immediate crisis is what we are talking about, but I wanted to get your feedback and also make sure that we all are aware that this does affect the HIPPY program. The HIPPY program that provides maybe the stay-at-home mom with an opportunity to educate her child in her own home. And this is hitting that home visiting program as well. Can you speak a little bit upon that?
I may not have that information in front of me because I think that's part of one of our grants. That's a great question, but let me see if I can get some of that and follow back up with you.
Okay, I would appreciate that because I don't think really has been talked openly, and it is another component of this. Those moms who, like I did, I stayed home with my children, and I'm very thankful for that opportunity to do that. But this is a way the HIPPY program, provides great services to those families, and I want to make sure that we include that into the conversation moving forward if we're looking at some longer-term solutions. The other thing I'm trying to figure out, because you mentioned that this is still a higher rate than perhaps some other states. And I understand that, but what does it cost in the state of Arkansas, I think is more of the concerning question. I don't care what it costs in Texas. I don't care what it costs in Louisiana. I care what it costs here. And somewhere in this discussion, that took place because in the program that's now going to be put out there, I guess, it says Benton and Washington counties will be paid at a higher rate. And so, and the reason for that is because it costs more there. Well, if it costs more there, then somewhere someone has factored in what it costs. So why are we allowing those two counties to receive a higher rate and the rest of the state not? Like, why would we look at just those two counties and what it actually costs to provide the services there and just tell everybody else, well, it's less than, or it's more than what we would receive in another state? Can you help us understand what went into those ideas?
So as part of the condition of this grant, you have to do a market rate study, and we have a contract with UAMS to do that. Some of the feedback that we've definitely heard is that study only happens every 3 years or so. So the latest study that we were able to build this dollar amount off of was that market rate study was back in 2023. And in that study, it designated Benton and Washington as a part of that, because it looks at the high-cost communities, urban, rural, it does a bunch of those different factors and helps setting the rates. The federal grant says you can't go below 50% of the market study recommendation. We recommended, and this is what the feds would often recommend, that dollar amount was based on a 75% rate of that market study. So like, yeah, we looked at neighboring states. The threshold that could have been dropped to for our recommendation was 50%. This is 70%, 75%, and that's where that number came from.
Okay, I guess I still don't understand the other two counties. And let me ask just one other thing, and I'll stop. I could talk for a long time, and I know we have other presenters that want to talk too. As I mentioned, I love the tiered system because it does help the parent in understanding, you know, what the cost is for that care and the quality of the care, and we're improving and hopefully getting everybody to raise the quality of care. And I absolutely love that. Quality care is so very, very important. But I do have to ask, how often is that reassessed for each facility? And is that done, you know, if I qualify and I'm a level 5, I've been certified level 5 quality of care, when is that assessed again? And how often are we positive that a level 5 facility is in fact still a level 5 facility?
All that's to fill it all. It sounds like it happens every 3 years for that evaluation.
Are we positive that that's done
I might have to check.
every 3 years for every single facility is the question?
That may be a question you asked for. I just don't know that off the top of my head.
Okay, thank you. Representative Pagan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, listening to all this and everything else in the short-term notice, I understand that the funding is going to stay the same until November 1st. Did you guys even think about maybe keeping the co-pays the same till November 1st, just to kind of help families out? Because I mean, if we're raising that and it starts tomorrow, then you know, that's, for some people back in my district, it may not seem a whole lot to a lot of other people, but for them that's a lot to go ahead and figure that out for tomorrow.
Right. So I think the short answer to that question is yes. Like, we're willing to have that conversation. What I'm telling you right now is we may not have the money if we keep everything in place to make these payments in October, because the fund balance is there. So if the legislature is going to give us the money to make it happen, we can have that conversation. We had to make decisions based on the pot of money from this federal program. I can't make it grow. I can't add other money to it. That's why we made the decisions we made. It's about $3 million a week, depending on the week. If that fund balance that we have, which is under $10 million, dries up and Congress goes on vacation forever and there's no quarterly payment, I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot. That's why those recommendations were to start October 1st. We've got to reduce spending in this grant if we're going to sustain this program.
No, I agree. I was just trying to see if we could you know, we're shooting at the November 1st, then, you know, trying to keep it consistent for families and providers, for everybody else. Also, number two is, I'm more concerned that, yeah, we're looking at a government shutdown and a possible CR, but that CR that they're looking at is only good for November 21st of this year. So what are we going to do to be prepared and not be back having this same meeting in 30 days?
Which is why we said we need to implement this October 1st, right? I know it's not popular. We're spending $6 to $8 million more a month than we receive. And if that budget doesn't happen or it gets a decline, we're right back here again. This is why this went out so quickly. So yeah, did it happen fast? Could it better be communicated? Could we involve more people? 1,000%. Are we hitting the panic button that this pot of money is no longer going to exist by Thanksgiving if something doesn't happen? 1,000%.
Well, I agree with you on that, but what I'm saying is I guess going back is what we've learned now from communicating with people and a short-term notice. We also might behoove ourselves to be prepared to, hey, also too, we could have the same conversation in 30 days.
Yeah,
and so I just hope as a state that we're prepared and ready to go to have those communications ready to go, because we'll be back.
Right, and so to that, like when I met with some providers today, I had that exact conversation, because that's what they were asking is, can we pause for these 30 days on reimbursements, figure it out? And I even said, what if that means I got to call you at Christmas and say the pot of money's out? They said, we'd rather work towards that, knowing that that could be a possibility in the future, because we would have time to plan for that. This hitting us now so quickly didn't give us that time. So yes, I think 1,000%, that needs to be part of the conversation. We can't just be kicking these cans down the road. We need to look at this investment in early learning.
Well, I hope we all are, as a state and providers, are prepared and get prepared for next month, because we'll be back here having that discussion again if we're following the federal government. Thank you, Madam Chair.
As we're talking about the families again, the folks that receive these allocations, isn't there still a federal mandate that they stay within 7% of their income?
Of the family income.
Of the
yes, ma'am.
family incomes. How many of our folks, our families, is that going to affect?
I don't think it's going to affect any, because one, we wouldn't go above that. The rate that was set at the recommendations based on the median income of the ranges was around 4%. But if a family has a lot of children, it depends. Some of these answers aren't as simple as they already give, but we wouldn't go beyond that 7% for any family, because that's the limitation that was recently enacted in a 2024 rule.
So we're staying at
Yes,
staying
ma'am.
at 7%. Thank you. Representative Bott?
Thank you, ma'am. So I understand that some of the states from the SREB, I want to apologize, put in state dollars to try to help make it till they could find out about the CR that we're sitting there waiting on.
Okay.
My
That's
question-
what I said. I was confused when you said that. I was like,
So
I
that's
don't
what it was,
understand
they had
that.
already put state dollars in there. If this is never refunded, like if if the feds never fund this, what happens then? Can you tell me what that?
As far as like say they just zero out the
Yes,
whole
sir.
program, well, I guess $150, $60 million of voucher programs we could either pick up as a state or just wouldn't be made available.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Representative Wooten?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here today. First of all, unfortunately, I appreciate the fact that you gave your background and your learning ability and that type of thing. The unfortunate thing about that is the fact it didn't take place in Arkansas with Arkansas people. My first question is, how many parents have you talked with who benefit from this program?
Like currently, in this, I talk to families all the time.
And talk with any of them. Okay, secondly.
No, I said I talk to families all the time.
Okay, secondly, do the providers have access to what the individual parents make?
I don't know if they get access to what they make. What they would get is the allocation based on what they qualify for the sliding scale from the state.
Okay, so why would we depend upon the providers to inform the parents of the state decision, which has been placed, the whole burden has been placed upon the federal government. It's their fault. Let me ask you this. How many years have we gone without a budget at the U.S. Congress?
I don't know the answer.
About 5 years.
Yeah.
How many times have we threatened to close down the government? How many times?
I don't keep
4 or
track
5
of that,
times.
at least.
Well, all right. Let me ask you this then. How many times have you taken this type of action at the last minute to reduce the pay that the schools providers receive and that the parents receive in order that the school can compete with the ABC mandate that we put out there?
So we get federal allocations and redistribute them out to schools and community all the time, like every quarter. We just got an update to all of our Title I allocations this morning that we're going to send to districts. You got new numbers.
Okay. My next question is, if you permitted, Madam Chairman, my next question is, have you ever done this before? Have you ever told the providers or anyone that you have a contract with that we can't pay you?
I feel like you're asking me loaded questions.
No,
if I had to give people bad news
that's
all the
what I'm
time,
trying
if I
to
had
do.
to tell people their grants managers change all the time, that I have to tell people their terms and conditions of their contracts change all the time.
Okay.
That's part of my job.
I know what your job is. I know very well what your job is, and you brought that up. Did you inform the governor of this action you were taking beforehand?
I've met with the governor and her staff.
And you met with her and her staff, but yet you didn't have the courtesy to extend
That's
it
not
to
true.
this body.
I've met with key legislators. I did not meet with every single legislator. I did not speak with a committee.
Well, we
that I
never
met with
knew
key
about it, so
legislators.
I would advise you in the future that the total body needs to be informed of an action that's going to affect the well-being of every child involved in early childhood care in this state. My next question is this. Why are you cutting $340,000 out of what the universities and colleges receive in the ABC program if it's state money? All we've heard is federal money.
Right, so there has been no cuts to the ABC program. There has been some updates to the grants that some of the universities receive in this program. So those are grants that are in this program.
Well, are you cutting $340,000 out of the grants of the ABC?
Of ABC? We've not had any conversations around ABC.
How about the $1,076,000 that's been cut out, a total of preschool grants and fiscal CCDF and ABC of $340,000, and the total is $1 million.
Right. So I want to make sure we're clear. ABC is a state program. We have not made any conversations around that.
Well, my information is that $340,000 has been cut out of that. Is that correct?
Not to my knowledge, no. There has been no cuts to ABC.
Okay. All right. Madam Chairman, I may want back in the queue, but thank you.
Thank you. We're going to hear a little bit more about the PDG grants in a little bit too. We'll talk more about the development. Representative Hudson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here. So when you were looking at other states and trying to make determinations about what to do, did you endeavor to do an apples-to-apples comparison? For example, Texas has, 30 million people in it? We've got 3. You mentioned Tennessee. I know that they've got a significantly higher population. How did you decide where to make your comparisons to make a determination on what steps to take?
So the recommendation that we're looking at for the reimbursement funding was based on the market rate study done by the University of Arkansas, UAMS, that says 75% of what the threshold is for the average cost of care. The federal grant allows you to go down to 50%, but they typically recommend you to be around 75%, and that's where that number is.
Does that take into account, and you may not know, I mean, since UAMS did the study, the fact that they have a much lower minimum wage, for example, than we do here in Arkansas, and so their costs for the providers may be significantly lower than those for Arkansas providers?
Yeah, my understanding is when they do that snapshot, they pull real-time data on what the cost of care is.
And then I wanted to make sure I understood on the co-pays, you mentioned that you were planning to raise them, and I think this was for the 60% and above, about $10.43. Is that per day, per month, per year?
It depends on the category, but it sounds like the one you're referencing is per day.
Okay, so that's, I was an English major, so I try to avoid math, but that's $208.60 per month for a family with 2 kids, and that's $2,503.20 per year. Does that sound right?
Roughly, without doing the math.
You may have been an English major too, I don't know. I mean, was there any discussion about what kind of impact that was going to have on families? I mean, $2,500 is difficult for any family, certainly in a time like this with inflation, to pull out, but these are people who are receiving assistance and paying their daycare costs. And I'm hearing from several families who are saying, we may have to pull our kids out and I may have to quit my job.
Yeah.
Because it just doesn't make economic sense. We don't have $2,500 a year. So was that part of any discussions when y'all were figuring out what steps to take?
Absolutely, and that's not something that we want to see happen. And when we look at when you read the spirit of the grant, it even states in there, and I wrote it down, that families are expected to contribute to the cost of care on a sliding scale basis. And the rules that have been updated in 24 said that percentage can't go up to 7%. We didn't want to go up to 7% because we know that's a burden on the families. Those recommendations are around 4%. Is that the right number? I don't know. That's why I said we have to start somewhere if we want to look at the long-term sustainability of this program.
And on that 7%, it's my understanding that the department at some point has applied for a waiver from the federal government to actually increase above the 7%. Is that correct?
I don't know if we have applied for that waiver. I know some states have, but I don't think we have.
Okay. The last question I have, and it's maybe more of a philosophical one, and I'm concerned about it. I've spoken to several daycare providers who are saying that, in essence, these cuts will mean that they can't afford to take anyone who has these vouchers because they can't. These families will not be able to pay, and their alternative is to have to raise rates for all of their families, whether they take these vouchers or not. And so, in essence, the concern is that some of these providers who have been offering slots to these kids will have to start turning them down, and then those children will not be able to find care. And so, in essence, by saying that we're changing the program, we're essentially going to just gut it because these vouchers are going to become worthless. Do you share the concern that we are essentially changing the program in such a way that it is going to be difficult to even say that it helps families because the burden is still too great for the families to be able to seek quality daycare for their children?
Yeah, that's why I'm here, and that's why I've been meeting with providers, because early learning, access high quality care is a top priority. Unfortunately, there's some unintended consequences that we don't want to see. And when I meet with providers and they look at what implementing this new daily rate is or reimbursement rate is compared to what they've been giving, it's significant. They don't want to pass that cost on to the parent, but they also can't absorb that cost, and it puts them in a conundrum. We're all on the same team here. What I'm telling you is if we don't do anything to this grant, this program won't exist. So if we want to continue funding it the way we are, we will roll up our sleeves, we will get with these providers, we will do whatever we can. I don't have the authority to make that decision or the budget to make that happen.
Thank you.
Senator Hammond.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for letting committee members have an opportunity to ask questions. End of the day, the sliding scale is going to go into effect at some point in the future regardless. Is that a fair statement?
I think if this program is going to be sustained over time, we have to do that.
Okay. And we're talking about having fine at the current rate. I just want to make sure my number is right. $80 million is what we would have to come up
And
with.
that's a rough number, and I think we had some members talk about if the grants come through at a higher rate, that might be less, but we're not planning on that.
And I'm just trying to be real quick, so, and quick answers are good. So right now, we're operating on the assumption that the federal government's going to cut the program funding, and this is your alarm that you have set off that is coming out. We may find out when they get the budget in place that, hey, everything's going to continue as it is, and things will work itself out. But right now, sitting here today, we don't know that. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So also I want to ask you the question, when it comes to the calculation of the cost, there's a difference between what market rates say that people could pay, but then the actual cost to operate, given inflation, what it costs to hire good health, overhead, insurance, all that kind of stuff. When you do a comparison to other states, are you looking at what people can pay, or are you actually looking at what it costs to run a preschool facility?
Right, and that's why I want to be clear that market rate study was done by the University in Arkansas based on the cost of what it costs to produce. Now that study hasn't been updated since 2023, so the cost of business is different today than what it was, but the recommended rate that we had in here for reimbursement was based off that market study.
Okay, and not to be redundant, but the market rates are what people can pay, but then there's the actual cost to run the facility. I know that may vary from facility to facility depending on management styles, programming offer, all those kind of things, but that rate study is based on actual costs.
I don't know if I know the answer to that question. I'll have to get that for you.
I'd like to get that if you don't
Sure.
mind. And then what's not been discussed to date, the length is you got 1,100 people on the waiting list, is that correct?
Currently about that.
By doing what you're talking about doing, will that allow any of the 1,100 to come off that waiting list, or will that waiting list remain the same by implementing what you're proposing to do?
So I think as we look at that waiting list for this implementation, we want to prioritize different groups on that waiting list, because once you're already in the program, you're typically in there for a year until you come up for reauthorization. If we have priority lists of the families and students that we want to serve, they might take precedence over that, but at this current rate, it wouldn't reduce that waiting list.
Could it potentially add to the waiting list, because if centers are not taking individuals because either the families can't afford to pay the difference, or the centers choose not to take vouchers anymore, could that waiting list
Potentially, yeah.
Okay, so I think that needs to be in the discussion about the have over the next 30 days. Last question, or close to the last question, would be this. There are certain requirements that are placed on the facilities that if you take the money, then we expect to do this. Maybe that's curriculum or other things. Because there's going to be a reduction, those requirements that are being placed on the centers, are those going to be stopped, or are they still going to be continued to meet those requirements with less funding to do it with?
Well, I don't think you want to do anything that lowers health, safety, and welfare of the students. So when you look at those licensing requirements, those minimum expectations, I don't see that going down. But with those reimbursement rates for higher tiers may have required different actions by the agency. I think that needs to be part of the discussion.
So like take HIPPY program, because this is going to touch the HIPPY program, is that correct?
As I said earlier, I don't have that in front of me right now.
Okay. I know that my understanding that there's certain requirements that are on those programs, as far as what they're expected to deliver in the way of services, material, whatever support. But if we're going to cut their funding, we still expect them to deliver that. That in itself, I think, is a conundrum. How do we expect them to continue to do what we're asking them to do, but the funding's not there for them to do it? And that's going to have an adverse effect on, I think, early childhood development. I think over the next 30 days that you have those meetings,
Sure.
Something that needs to be put into consideration. Last thing is this, the walkway, and this is being redundant, I know, but loud and clear, redundant, but the position you're taking right now is that over the next 30 days to continue continue the raise. But everybody needs to understand, if you take money from the pot now, there'll be less money in the pot later, potentially, depending on what Congress does. And all we may do is slow down the train, but the train's going to come to a stop. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, and I think part of that is a commitment, one, for them to get a kind of handle on this not hitting them so fast, and two, some of the providers said that they'd like to sit down, look at some options. Maybe there's different proposals, different angles, different things to look at. This would be a chance to kind of roll up our sleeves together, because at some point, this current rate is not sustainable.
And I asked for fund balances. Is there any wiggle room in any of your fund balances to help plug this hole? And do you have the authority to even move money between fund balances?
I don't think we could move a fund balance from a different grant to this grant.
Well, I think that needs to be out there publicly, just so the public knows what your limitations are or not. Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Barnes.
Thank you, Chair. One question. You mentioned that you did meet with the governor. If you can elaborate on that, was she open to maybe trying to give some funds towards solving this issue?
Yeah, I think in my conversations with the governor, she wants to make as little disruptions as we can to families, and I think I should expand access and do whatever we can, because she knows how important this space is and is willing to have those conversations.
Great, thank you.
Senator Love.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Mr. Lee, I got a couple of things I want to discuss. First things first is that we're talking about child care vouchers. And, you know, the conversation that we're having in District 15, Senate District 15 is this, is that it seems like, and this is the appearance, it seems like that when we were talking about vouchers for private schools, you were on top of it. But now we talk about vouchers for the most vulnerable populations in our district, and all of a sudden this change is going to have to come. So walk me through that, because I do want to ask you, when you first, I know the question was asked, when you first found out about this shortfall, what the conversation was and when did you know about it, because I'm hearing a lot of different things about when you all first knew about the shortfall. So that's what I want to ask you, but first just address that issue of private school vouchers versus the vouchers for the most vulnerable, and how we seem to be prepared for that and ask for $90 million, but we didn't seem to be prepared for this.
Yeah, so thank you for the question. I just want to make sure I'm on the same page. When you talk about private school vouchers, I'm assuming that you're talking about the educational freedom accounts.
Yes.
So I go back to, that's a state program that's funded through state dollars. These vouchers that we're talking about is one federal program. We don't control the money that goes in or out of that bucket. It's a formula grant that we receive from the feds, which is why we're having this conversation in a very open public forum today, because if we don't increase that funding or add a state commitment, it could greatly impact the quality of service those children receive.
But here's the thing, though, is that you all seem to be more on top of that issue, and you seem to be more willing to come and ask us for the additional funding, the additional appropriation, versus we're 7 days, I guess 4 days out, and there was no request made.
So just like this formula grant and every other formula grant that we get from the feds, whether it's Title I, Title II, Title III, we pass on that formula grant to the districts. I've never once come to the state and said, Title III funding's been lower, can we offset what that allocation is? Never once. It's a federal grant based on a formula that we pass on, that we receive. So just like this program and any other program, we inform the recipients of those allocations.
Hold on for a second. Let's turn it down, because you started to yell at me, and I'm not yelling at you, but I want you to answer that so that we can go through it. But you started.
Well, and I don't mean to yell. I do get passionate, but you're trying to accuse me of not caring about these students.
No, I'm not accusing you, hold on. I didn't accuse you of anything. What I said was the perception was this. I didn't accuse you of anything. Now, we've worked together before, so please don't say that I'm accusing you of anything. But the perception is out there, so I wanted you to give you a chance to address the perception. That's what I wanted you to do.
And that's why I go back and say, when you talk about educational freedom accounts, it's a state program. We talked about ABC accounts, it's a state program. You're saying that perception is I don't care about this federal voucher program, but that's not the case. This is a big deal to a lot of students and families. This is a space that I am 1,000% on investing every dollar that we can. The more money we can invest in getting kids ready for kindergarten, the better our state's going to be. So I don't know where this perception's coming from, but it's not true. And just like any other federal grant, like we get amendments to those grants every quarter. They're formula grants. I've never once come to this legislature and said, oh, by the way, this formula grant last quarter changed. We need to do something about it.
So have we faced this drastic of a cut to a program?
In other federal grants?
Yes.
I'd have to do some research, but yeah, I mean, those grants fluctuate.
Okay, so the grants fluctuate, but because we're talking about putting some people out of business. And so that's what's going on here. That people are also, as you say, you're passionate about it. People are also passionate about making sure that their kids stay in high quality child care centers. But lastly, I want to go to this. And this is going to go back to the promulgation of the rules and the changes that we're having. So you said that this is a 100% federally funded program. So when you begin to do the rule changes, does that mean that you don't have to bypass the legislature? That you don't.
Let me clarify. So when you talk about the CCDF grant, there is a state match of about $10 million. So it's not 100% federal, but the majority of it is a federal program.
Okay, so then would not the change in the rules, would that not necessitate you then coming to this body to
Right,
actually?
and that's why this doesn't have state rules. This is a federal grant. It's an appropriation grant.
So then all the grants, I'm just trying to clarify, all the grants that are 100% federally funded, then that means when you promulgate the rules, you don't need to bring it to the legislature.
And that's what I'm saying. There's no rules to promulgate. Typically, when we get an allocation, like a federal allocation, I'll use like Title I. It's a formula grant. Then it gets applied to a state formula and gets distributed to those school districts. This is similar.
Okay. Madam Chair, I'll get back in the queue for
Thank you.
moderators.
Maybe it would be helpful if the legislature decided that we wanted to spend part of this $500,000 surplus that we have to boost early childhood. Is there a way to do that with those state funds that would not hurt our federal relationship with those grants?
Right, so I think it depends on what program you want to invest in. So like if you want to invest in ABC, which is a state program, not going to have any impact on the federal grant.
Right.
If you wanted to invest state dollars to offset federal expenditures, when you get into maintenance of effort, you're basically setting a foundation that you're going to continue that appropriation so it doesn't look like you're trying to get in a supplement situation.
Right. Yeah. Can you talk just a little bit about the difference between supplanting and
Yeah, so the federal code has some very clear guidelines that if you get a federal allocation, you can't take away state dollars because it looks like you're not providing a level of service that the state was already committed to. So if the state makes a commitment, we need to continue that commitment because if we got more federal dollars in the future and we took state dollars away, that could be considered supplanting because the state had made a commitment, but now you're not seeking that commitment because the feds are giving a commitment. It's supposed to supplement or go above and beyond what the state commitment is.
but we could support potentially we could support until we hear more about the federal grants.
For CCDF,
For whatever support we need for the providers and the families. A similar program, maybe.
I guess that goes back to like if you want to look at updating ABC or something to meet different tiered qualities that are similar to this program, I think that might be a different conversation than just putting money into
Right.
this bucket. If that, I
And
don't know if
that's
that
my
makes
question
sense.
is, how can we do that in a way that doesn't hurt that relationship, that great relationship?
Yeah, I think you'd have to look more at a state program, and we can help research that for you.
Great. And Senator Dismayne?
Yeah, I'd be happy to have a conversation about the budget issue. So if y'all want to just think about, most of all this has been into a peer meeting, right? And in a peer meeting, federal money flows through every single month for different programs, and they are not state programs, right? And we don't pass a new set of rules for those. Now, occasionally, if it's a state program that requires a new individual to be hired or a new position, we may authorize a new position. But we don't set up brand new programs in peer just because we receive federal dollars. And so when they're saying that you don't come to us, and I understand there's a lot of people in the room that are going to shake their head no, and I've seen it. But I'm telling you, we don't set up state rules for federal programs. We follow the guidelines, and they give us some latitude of what that looks like, and that discretion is left with the agency. But as far as us going in, I mean, it's 100% correct. If we want a state program, there is a path to do that. I don't know if you have enough latitude inside the ABC program to write new rules. I would doubt that you do, so it would probably take a state law first, and then from that state law, we can have an appropriation of state dollars, and then we follow through that process. But again, I've heard it from providers, I've heard it from some members. Just think about yourself sitting in a peer meeting, and we get a federal dollar. Do we follow up and have a rules meeting to approve how those dollars are spent? Never. Never. So that would be my clarifying point on that. I'd love to ask some questions when I get a chance.
This is your chance.
Awesome. All right. So, because if we're going to speak in this vein of creating a new state program, I want to make sure that I understand all the facts, the situation we're in, because again, I can repeat verbatim what I've been told by Department of Education to provider, and the provider is pretty much going to say that they're lying. Right? And so this has been a helpful conversation just to try to understand the different buckets that fund early childhood education for me, obviously someone that's not in that arena. What I would love to see is a chart of the buckets that go in to fund these programs for early childhood education. I mean, because I will tell you, I am still finding it hard to believe, and I'm going to say something that I can't believe to be true. That if you make 85% of median household income in the state of Arkansas, you get a full pay voucher or some small copay. But if you make 86%, you get zero. I can't believe that to be true. So if you could give me some more information like that, because that just seems impossible to me. But I believe that may be the federal program or how we've allowed it to be implemented. So I would like to see that. I would like to see the information on the surrounding states so we can get a better idea of what that looks like. Because I think what we're being asked to do is to create a new state program. Right? And if we're going to do that, I can promise that I don't want to be beholden to whatever the federal guidelines were for their program. And I don't imagine you ultimately will want to be either. So just to say, well, let's put some more money into it. Because also understand, if we put more money into this program and it continues on, we're beholden to keep giving those additional dollars. And if they change the parameters of that program, we are obligated to keep funding that program with their new parameters. So again, if we're going to do something, it's going to have to be on the state side, and it's going to have to be something that we diligently work through and have all the information. So I'm on a fact-finding mission at this point. And so if you don't mind, I think those timelines of the different buckets, when they're going to run out, all that goes into the higher education funding, what it looks like, and then we can have knowledgeable conversations about where we need to go with early childhood education. Because the other thing I'll tell the committee is, I can promise you, we're going to have this conversation again, and we're going to have it on healthcare, and we're going to have it, you name the entity, and we're going to have it over and over and over Whether it be because the feds decide that they want to go through the government shutdown and none of those dollars are flowing to us in the state again, or because they decide they want to eliminate programs. And you're going to be asked, should we continue? And if we do, what should it look like? And it's going to be a difficult time. And we can talk about surpluses. Those disappeared pretty quick. I mean, we're not talking about throwing nickels around. We're talking about tens of millions of dollars. So again, if you don't mind, you've heard a lot of questions. Hopefully the staff is taking that down. Putting that stuff on paper would be really, really helpful. Thank you.
And if you don't mind sending that to staff.
So we can share it with you and then you can send it to everybody.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, Representative Mark, come back up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of questions. This was at DHS at one point, right? Is this the program that was at DHS?
One of the programs, yeah.
Okay. And then when it came to y'all, who was over the program? Who is the boss of this program?
It was Tanya Williams.
Okay. And then was she aware of the shortfalls that were coming? And when was she aware? Was y'all made aware when it came from DHS to you that there were shortfalls going to happen?
Well, I think that's always been the conversation. When we knew, let's say back in February, to start establishing a wait list, that was those conversations around we've got to slow down the spending because we don't have enough in a fund balance to keep sustaining at the rates that we were getting. I don't think anybody predicted a fourth quarter rate adjustment based on the line item, so that kind of hit us by surprise.
And then I know like you're the main boss, but if Tanya's not over this anymore, who is over it now?
So, Ashlyn Abbey has been hired as an interim director.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Representative Wood.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. First of all, I want to make a statement, and I hate to say I told you so, but what Senator Desmain said is exactly right. This conversation is just beginning, and it's not going to be just with education, Mr. Secretary. It's going to be with health. It's going to be with any federal grant that comes into the state of Arkansas. The main reason is we owe, the federal government owes $37 trillion. $1 trillion a year in interest. And we cannot sustain that. We cannot, as citizens, sustain that. And it's a difficult time. And this is what I've warned my colleagues about for at least the last 4 or 5 years, is reckoning day is coming, and it's here. And whether the federal government shuts down or doesn't shut down, we're still going to have a $37 trillion debt, and it's got to be dealt with now, Mr. Secretary. Have you looked at any stopgap method from the surplus funds or extra money or cash balances or other amounts of money that you have down there?
Yeah, I think that's why when we heard from the providers, even though October 1's the new fiscal year, if we could pause on implementation for about 30 days, so let's say November 1, we'd be using our fund balance in this grant to make sure that we can continue those payments.
And that's what, 10 million? Or
a little less than that, yeah.
Okay, and by the way, along with what Senator Hammer said, your staff assured us that they would have the fund balances and everything for today's meeting, and we don't have that, do we?
I think we have it available for you.
Okay, how much is your budget for all of secondary education in the state? The RSA number, do you know?
When you say secondary, are you talking about K-12?
I'm talking about K through 12. And
I'll say a little over $3 billion.
Roughly, the number I have is $2.49 billion. And it's the same next fiscal year. And so they were relying, we were relying on you to come up with the extra money for the formula funding for every student in the state, whether it's freedom account or otherwise. But if you could come up with that amount of money, why can't you come up with a stopgap effort here to help these parents and children and providers out at least for 1 year? I mean, we're in a road to nowhere. We don't know what the federal government's going to be, but is it? And if we're talking about 80 million for a year, and I hate for us to start a new program. I just, because we have to have a balanced budget in Arkansas, and we have no choice. The politicians, the governors, not just Sarah, but the rest of them, try to make a big deal. We balance the budget. They don't have any choice. The Constitution says you can't spend more than you take in. So, is there any thought been given to some stopgap method use of funds down there that you have access to get us through this, to help these parents? And so many of them, like you say, and I agree with you wholeheartedly, that the younger, and I spoke to 12 schools in the past 2 weeks, and every one of them I've made the point that reading and writing and arithmetic and reading a new book opens a new world. Every day that they read a new book. So have y'all given any thought to it's less than 2% of your total budget.
I think that's where it gets complicated, where I guess the question with working with the legislature is, if we want to invest in offsetting this federal grant, is that a commitment that we're going to make in perpetuity? Or if there's a question on how do we provide more access to early learning and state programs, do we want to start a new program or expand an existing program? Those are the kinds of questions we need to answer.
Well, my question is there anything that we can do for a stopgap method for 6 months or a year to give the providers more time and to give the parents time to adjust in the event that the federal government continues like they are down the road? And if they shut down, I don't think it's going to be for just a week or 3 or 4 days.
No, and that's where the struggle is why we're saying we need to do some October 1st, because the fund balance in this program, it's not like we can shift other federal dollars into this program. The fund balance in this program wouldn't be able to last 6 months at the current rate.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and thank you, Madam Chairman.
And I will say, Representative Wooten, and to the rest of us, is the goal of this meeting is to talk about these things and see what we can do. So I don't think this is the end. This is not the end of this discussion. We're going to be talking about this for a long time. It's a national issue. It's one we've always subsidized every level of education except for the one that's most important to a child's life. And so it's a national conversation, obviously. If we can figure out a way to help make that stopgap with the budget constraints that we have, then great. And that's a conversation that we'll continue to have. And you're willing to do that, I know
Sure.
you are.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. Senator Love.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Secretary Leva, it's my understanding, and it was explained to me, that some of the federal dollars are also used to supplement the ABC program during the summer months when the schools is out. Is that correct or is that incorrect?
I don't know if I know the answer to that. It may be. It may be those families can qualify to use this program in the summer because the ABC typically run through a school year.
Do we know how much money, do we know how much that would be to cover that 8 to 10 weeks?
We can get that for you.
Okay, because this is, my point in asking that was to also say that this is another place where the state is taking the federal dollars in plugging in a state program. So if we were to actually plug in that additional money, then that means that would open up funding on on the federal side, would that not?
If you said to add the state dollars for the summer,
if we were to
I
add-
would think so, yeah.
So, I mean, like, some of the conversation that we're having is that the state probably needs to fulfill an obligation in the first place. Because if we're not truly covering all the ABC students for the 12-month period, just for the 9-month period, then we've actually contributed to the shortfall. I mean, I understand that your department is going to actually try to make everything work. I'm not saying that, and I applaud you all for that. But at the same time, we as a body need to understand it so that we can act appropriately. And so I do believe that this will be a conversation in the future, but I did want to try to get that point out there to see, like, I heard that, but I didn't.
No, I think to your point, if you expand ABC, and I think one of the challenges that a lot of private providers would say preclude them from participating is the reimbursement rate's not as high, and it requires a 40% match. So if we're going to reimagine ABC to try to make it more competitive, I guess, with a federal grant, then that's a deeper conversation.
And those are the conversations that we need to have. So thank you for that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, and thank y'all for your patience. We've got one more question, and then we'll go to our other speakers. Senator Dismayne.
Not a budget question. My question is, because I've heard and I feel like I just need to finally ask, my understanding is some of these changes are driven by the LEARNS Act. So we made some statutory changes that are then or helping lead to the shortfall and everything else. Can you walk me through what LEARNS Act changes were made that are having an impact on this problem?
So
helping foster this problem.
Right, so when you look at the federal grant, the appropriation, I'm going to round it, $136 million, there's required set-asides for professional development, for growth, for quality of about 12%. When you look at some of the implications, like LEARNS, when we were switching to the class observation tool or the development of the local leads, part of that 12% that we're required to set aside for professional learning took on some of those expenses for LEARNS implementation.
Is that it? Okay. Sorry, I have one more.
So just to make sure I can follow up,
I'm sorry.
No,
You're behind the cap.
I know, it's awful. It's my favorite spot. So what you're saying is we were able to kind of duplicate some of the efforts of LEARNS to be able to meet the 12% requirement.
Right, and there's also some state commitment dollars to that as well. It's not 100% on the burden.
But as far as LEARNS driving up the cost, we just shared cost with something that we were already going to do that we could apply to the 12%.
Correct, you have to spend that 12% on professional learning.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your explanation and for your willingness to help to make something better.
Of course, anytime.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
If you're looking at your agenda, we've got a plane to catch at 4 o'clock, so we're going to switch the agenda just a little bit and have Dr. Kelly, Dr. Brandon Kelly, and Gina Dickey. Going to come up and talk to us a little bit. Would you please introduce yourselves for the record?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Brendan Kelly, and I have the privilege of serving as the president of the Arkansas State University System.
Gina Dickey, consultant with Arkansas State University Childhood Services.
And please go right ahead.
I appreciate it, Madam. For over 50 years, A-State Childhood Services has been serving all of Arkansas's counties. We were the first entity to provide training for child care programs in the state of Arkansas. Our staff live throughout the state. We are working alongside child care educators and administrators to support the health, safety, education, and operational practices of the child care businesses that operate in this state. For us to address the impact of these cuts, while I am in the business of developing people of all ages, I wanted to bring my colleague, Gina Dickey, because she is integrated throughout our childhood services entity. She has the type of subject matter expertise for what is upstream in terms of training and creating quality in child care. The downstream impacts on families, children, etc. And then the impacts on our partners. And if you don't mind, Madam Chair, I'd like to hand it over to her to walk you through the impact on in the field.
Thank you for this opportunity, both to this body as well as to the university to represent them. That's feeling a little big. One thing that I wanted to say, first of all, was that it really is very exciting, this change, to recognize a B to 16 continuum. And I feel like in this seat today, I represent that higher ed component, and that all of that really does start at birth. And I really appreciate how many of you have said that in your comments today, that it's clear your understanding about the quality of early education being equivalently important to the access of that education. And so ASU Childhood Services really has a two-pronged approach here to this issue, is that we provide direct care. We have 10 programs in the Delta. We have for many, many years, back when ABC money was the old money, as some of you know, the old money, new money. One of those programs is on campus at the ASU campus in Jonesboro. 8 of them are connected to a school in some way along the Delta, and the newest one is in Newport. That was actually made at a request from an Economic Development Commission. And so with those partnerships, and I think part of what is complicated in understanding is how intricately involved, I think we got a good idea of that today, and how these funding sources work and how they are braided and blended across partnerships throughout the state to make quality early education happen. And the school readiness assistance is really been very key, if not a cornerstone to that. It started in this country in 1990, and Arkansas has been taking advantage of that opportunity ever since. So what was mentioned just previously was that the SRA funds are used for wraparound care, is how we refer to it, so before and after school care, for summer care. So the ABC programs that Arkansas State runs doesn't provide child care for a full day, full year for working parents. And so those two things are brought together so that we can offer those amenities for families, because that's what they need, right? A school day is not covering their work day. But they also, one thing that really hasn't come up in this conversation, and for really good reasons, because the topic that has been at hand and discussed in the last couple of hours is the most important topic, and that's getting direct services to children and families so that they can be prepared for kindergarten and to go to work. But the cuts were also made to programs like ours. So we provide technical assistance and professional development all over the state in those 50 areas. And it's an important component to quality that really is in jeopardy as well. And I think there will be colleagues behind me who don't know about this because we haven't been talking about it. We've been talking about more what's important to them and what we need to do to support the continuation of care for children. But these kinds of professional development opportunities are critically important to a population who our minimum licensure requirements is that you have to be 18 years of age, have a high school diploma or GED. That's what it takes to work in our programs across the state. And even the best programs that are represented behind me, there's probably a population within their teams that Gina Dickey would say they hire, nice, and train. Because that's a way we can keep rates low for families. Because we can't afford $50,000 like K-12. It's not the budget, right? So we have educated people, and some of them will be talking to you next. But for the most part, we hire, nice, and train, making these training entities absolutely imperative to maintaining quality. And on any given day in the state, it is a modest estimate to say we're running about a 25% turnover. So there's always new people to hire, nice, and train.
And that's in large part, again, because of the wages that we're able to offer so that parents can afford care. We can't compete with Chick-fil-A and Dillard's. So we hired Nice and Train, and we have cut that budget as well. So there are practitioners behind me, colleagues in other universities and other organizations who we found out last week that we will be taking large cuts to our budgets. Some of them started the very following day. Others will start next week as well. So those are after contracts were signed, people are employed, plans are made, projects are underway. So they are involved as well, and I appreciate the university wanting to speak on our behalf in this issue.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Members, Representative Wooten.
Thank you. Mr. Ian, President Kelly, when did y'all find out about this? Last Wednesday?
I believe it was September 24th.
24th?
Yes.
Okay, September 24th. Let me ask you if these numbers are correct that I have gotten relative to your programs on the PDG grant. It was for $916,000, but the effect is going to be due to the quickness of it. It's going to be between $367,000 and $467,000. Is that right?
I don't have the full budget in front of me. That number sounds right.
Okay. The next one is the CCDF award reduced from $1,077,000 to $808,000, or a $269,000 reduction.
I don't want to confirm that number unless I have the full budget.
Okay.
Yeah, but I can get that information to you for sure.
But the total loss that I've been provided with, and I've heard just one side, but that's enough. I noticed, let me ask you this question. Did this come from the Department of Education or did it come from Higher Learning? You know, he's secretary of both, which I think is a mistake, which I've made clear before, but anyway, I noticed he conveniently left before you got up. And I'm not putting anything on you or him, but...
No, I don't have the letters of notification in front of me, but if you don't mind, Representative, I'll get that to you.
But did the notice come from the higher ed division or did it come from secondary?
If you don't mind me getting that clarification, I'll get it for you.
Okay. That I think that's important to know. Either way, he had control of it. And either way, it's going to impact childhood development, education in this state. It's going to affect every parent, every child, every provider, each and every university, University of Arkansas, ASU, and also UAMS and other colleges that participate in the program. Is that a correct assumption?
Yes, sir. Yes.
So would you say that early childhood development is under attack, either at the federal level or at the state level? I hate to put you on the spot.
I wouldn't use that language. I'll use the language of, I'm so glad that you're so interested in early childhood development.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think the point's been made. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Mayberry.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. And I will say one of the fantastic things about all this is that we're at the Capitol talking about early childhood education far more than we have in many years. And I'm hoping that, you know, sometimes some bad things happen, but good things can come out of it. And so I'm really excited about the conversation that we have. I had a very sweet friend of mine say something to me, I don't know, less than a year ago. And I want to throw this out there for food for thought, because we did pass the access plan this past term, we passed something, the LEARNS Act, the term before that. Maybe in this next legislative session, we're really concentrating on a big package dealing with early childhood education. And that's what I hope comes out of this in the long term. But I'm throwing this out there for food for thought. This person came to me and she said, Julie, when I go to get my hair done, that person has a license. When I go to get my fingernails done, that person has a license. But when I take my child to an early childhood center for childcare, that person doesn't have a license. And do we have our priorities a little out of whack? And so I actually began looking into it some, wanted to bring it up this past session. It just really wasn't good timing, but maybe this is something that higher ed can get involved in, because to my understanding, that there's actually some funding there to help our child care workers achieve a certain level of training that maybe could be included, to be required. Now with that, there comes a cost, because if the person has to have training and meet a certain certification, then there's going to be a higher cost. But just looking for some feedback on that and what we can do maybe in the future conversations about this to really make sure that those who are providing the care to our most vulnerable, we're talking brand new babies, who cannot speak for themselves, that there's some level of licensing involved in that.
Gina's the subject matter expert in that. I mean, I would say broadly, the more educated and well-trained any individual is in whatever endeavor they're entering into, we are going to get better outcomes from that. We know that at every level of education. And I'll just use the adult example. We train the professoriate, myself included, with PhDs, but we don't teach them how to teach necessarily. That's something we do after they become a professor. We don't get a chance to do that when at other levels of education. So I think that's critical.
Representative Mayberry, yes. We think knowledge, skills, and ability are absolutely key, because the most important component of quality is the person that's in the room providing the right care for children. Arkansas has invested in the Teach Scholarship Program. It too was cut with these cuts. And in fact, the speaker that's coming behind us has benefited and taken the opportunity from that and has made that available to her staff. So I've asked them to make a reference to that opportunity and what that's meant to them. Absolutely, and we're also looking at, we have entered into a partnership, Arkansas Early Childhood Association, that we are providing a Department of Labor approved apprenticeship program, of which Arkansas State University provides mentors for those apprentices on site. So you've got that hands-on, engaged learning in real time, because that's what real kids need, is real-time information. And yeah, that's also, those things are ideal. We also, in respect to the colleagues behind me that don't have those formal pieces of paper that say they know stuff, we've been looking really hard at competency-based opportunities for higher education based on what you already know and acquired and learned through real-life experience as an opportunity for stackable credentials.
Senator Hammer.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to make this statement, that you correct me if I'm wrong, because I came into this meeting thinking we're just going to be talking about vouchers, because that's what we've been hearing most about. But what I'm hearing now is there are a lot of components that are going into what is classified as early childhood development, either in direct services or wraparound services, I'll call it, which is what I would refer to what you're doing. It's more of a wraparound services for the parents, but it's coming out of the early childhood pot of money. Am I correct in that?
Yes, sir. The 12% quality set aside with the Secretary referenced, that's where the contracts come from for people like us at A State Childhood Services and others. And so those have been equilaterally cut across the board.
Okay, and that kind of goes to Senator Dismay's point a while ago about, I think really what will help in the conversation is all the various entities that are dependent upon that pot of money and how those are utilized for the overall goal and purpose of developing early childhood development. I guess the question I have, and maybe you threw that number out a minute ago, but what's the financial impact to your programs based on what's being proposed?
I think the total number was $2 million, $2,080,000.
Okay. And maybe you don't want to talk about this publicly, but how are you as an institution prepared to absorb that, or is that part of the discussion? And now that you heard the conversation in the room today about maybe a 30-day reprieve, is that giving you time to go back to talk to your board and to your folks and say, we need to get ready for this?
That's right. Joanne Melly, who's our longtime director of State Childhood Services, is working through that. Obviously, this is new information, so operationalizing those cuts is still in process. But obviously, it is a reduction in those services.
Okay, and maybe this isn't the question you need to answer, but I'm not sure anybody from the department's left in the room to answer this question. But when it got to when this program was all set up years ago, and I'm not sure, when did your component get added to the program from the original date when it started, or has it always been part of what was given in the way of federal funding, or have you just been added on as years have gone by?
We've been there since the beginning. And as the funds came more funds came available to the state, then childhood services grew in their capacity.
Right, so this has been something that's been evolving over the years. More money has been coming down from the federal government to the state to distribute out, and your growth has your growth been at the rate of the funds that have been given you to grow your programs, or how many of your programs have been grown not being dependent upon those federal dollars?
Almost 100% of the budget is either reliant upon the quality set aside by the federal government, or a portion of the Arkansas Better Chance program that has been set aside for quality improvement.
Okay, good. Last thing I'll say, Madam Chair, thanks for the latitude, is what I'm trying to process in my mind is, over the years, how much and how many have become dependent upon this federal funding, and now that there seems to be a correction that is taking place, now we have to take a hard look at what's going to survive, what's not going to survive, and could possibly, you would like to hear this, but could possibly some of the money be redirected from what you are doing and moved over to another area that may be more boots on the ground, like the vouchers to the parents that are in the actual preschool facilities, or are those federal funds restricted to where what you're getting can only be used for what you're getting?
So the Child Care Development Block Grant requires a 12% quality set aside. So that's the only requirement. I don't know if we're met that threshold or we go beyond that threshold. But that would give but there's some flexibility even within what's defined quality. Right? So the latitude that states have on how they administer their CCDF funding is very broad. So there is some flexibility in that. And I do think,
Open mind.
looking at the cuts and the timing of them, my presumption, Gina Dickies, is that some money has been moved from the contracts to vouchers, right? Which is why we don't necessarily disagree with that. But it was not part of a conversation and we were not involved.
And that's part of the problem, I think, is now everybody gets involved to where you have a platform to be included in those conversations. Thank you.
Representative Wood.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Won't take me just a second. The information I had is from another university, which I won't identify, but they just fired their head coach. So this is for Senator Dismay, if he's still still in the room, we're up to about $83 million now rather than $80 million. So we've got to take a long, hard look at childhood education in this state for the parents, the children, and the providers like ASU and the other university and UAMS. Thank you.
Seeing no more questions, I think we can bring our next testifiers up. Thank you guys so much for being here. So next we'll hear from Christine Eichler and Dr. Stacy Pipkins. Would y'all please introduce yourselves for the record? Thank you.
My name is Christine Eichler, and I'm a family.
Put your butt.
Hi, my name is Christine Eichler, and I operate a family child care home in Romance, Arkansas.
My name is Stacy Pipkins, and I have 4 programs in the Central Arkansas area.
But good afternoon, and thank you for allowing me to speak today. Again, my name is Christine Eichler, and I have operated my in-home family child care program in rural Arkansas for almost 40 years. I have cared for generations of children, and now I care for their children also. I hold a national accreditation through the National Association of Family Child Care. I maintain a Better Beginning Star Level 6, and I currently serve as the president of the Arkansas Family Child Care Association. I'm here today not only as a small business owner and educator, but as the voice of hundreds of family child care providers and educators across our state who are deeply affected by the recent changes to our early childhood subsidy system. On September 19th, we were informed of across-the-board rate reductions and the introduction of a sliding scale copay for families, laying off helpers or eliminating staff, cutting back on menu quality and snacks that aren't reimbursed, reducing infant care slots, which are already scarce in Arkansas, considering closing doors entirely or refusing to serve subsidy families because they simply cannot afford to take the cut. And it's not only the direct child care rates being cut, funding for the support system, the ladies that just spoke, gentleman and lady that just spoke, that gives us free trainings, coaching, and mentorship. It also is being reduced. These supports are what build and maintain high-quality care. They give educators the stamina, the knowledge, and the encouragement to stay in this field. Without them, we risk losing not just capacity, but quality. Arkansas rightly dedicates about half of its state budget to education. This reflects our commitment to children's success. But birth through age 5 lays the foundation. For everything that comes after, including those 3rd grade reading scores, we're so focused on. Research shows that 90% of brain development happens in the first 5 years of life. Early childhood educators are brain builders. When funding is cut from this stage, we risk undermining everything the K-12 system is working to achieve. Without strong social-emotional pre-reading and pre-writing skills developed early, children begin school at a disadvantage, playing catch-up from day 1. Family child care providers are also a lifeline of resources for families, helping families navigate medical and developmental concerns, coaching parents through potty training and behavior challenges, supporting children's social-emotional growth, connecting families with community services. We are not simply here to complain. We are here to collaborate. On behalf of the family child care providers across Arkansas, I respectfully ask, pause the cuts. Give families and providers time to adjust. reevaluate the system with provider input to ensure sustainability, increase transparency and invite stakeholders to the table, protect infant care, rural care, and the training, coaching, support systems that sustain quality early learning. These funding changes are not abstract numbers on a spreadsheet. They are affecting real people, real businesses, and real children across Arkansas. Mandy in Harrison runs a family child care. She's a level 6 Better Beginnings nationally accredited home. Out of her 8 children, 6 are supported by the School Readiness Assistance Program. She also provides infant care, which is rare in Boone County. There are only 40 infant spots in the entire county. If funding is reduced, some of those infant care spots could disappear, creating an even larger strain on families needing care for their youngest children. Monica in Faulkner County cares for children where half are subsidized through the School Readiness Program. She's unsure how she can balance her budget under the new rates and is worried she may have to cut back on services. Gwen, also in Faulkner County, recently used a grant to expand her family child care home to 16 children, opening more infant and toddler spots. But she has already had to let a full-time worker go, a worker whose own children were enrolled in her program. Now Gwen is losing both that worker's support and the income from the children who left, threatening the sustainability of her expanded program. Miss C in Pine Bluff runs a nationally accredited program with a level 6 status. Under the new changes, she stands to lose $3,000 a month. She says it will be a challenge for parents to pay the new co-pays and a direct loss of her wages. When she had the SRA funding for her level 6 status support, she was able to help families in tangible ways, like buying diapers for a single mother of twins. This demonstrates what early child care educators do. When we have the funds we've earned, then we choose to use them to put back into our program and into our families and into our children. These are not isolated cases. Across the state, providers are making deep budget cuts, scaling back programs, or in some cases, closing their doors. The ripple effect of these decisions will touch children, families, and entire communities. In conclusion, I entered this profession so I could stay home with my own children. I stayed in this profession to make a difference because every child deserves to have high-quality care. Family child care homes like mine are small businesses, but together we form the backbone of early care in our state. Thank you for your time, for listening to the concerns of providers and families, and for your commitment to doing what's right for Arkansas's youngest learners. We stand ready to work with you to ensure you that every child from birth to 5 has the strong foundation they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cookie.
I've been in the early childhood education field for over 30 years. I hold a doctorate in education with an emphasis in organizational leadership. I've served on the board for the Central Arkansas affiliate of the Arkansas Early Childhood Association for several years and am now the president. I've contributed to multiple advisory boards. I feel like I know this industry. I've dedicated my life to nurturing children, empowering teachers, and supporting families through community partnerships. I own 4 child care centers in the Central Arkansas area. We serve between 300 and 400 families each year, with about 120 to 140 of those that receive the SRA subsidies at a time. The reimbursement rates came in. And we struggled just to make ends meet. I lived week by week under that system. But when the quality system came into place, it pushed me to try harder to get quality levels to achieve that. And now, because of the tiered system that we're under, I'm able to afford higher quality teachers in our program. I have many staff members that hold master's degrees, bachelor's degrees, associate degrees. I think we figured out we have 6 right now. Gina had referenced that earlier. The TEACH program is a scholarship program that allows women, people that are working in early childhood settings, to go to college on this scholarship. It requires that providers like myself pay 10% of that. And these higher reimbursement rates is what allows me to be able to do that. So I can pay higher quality staff members because of that. In 2023, Arkansas was ranked #1 in the nation for early childhood education. That ranking was based on access and quality, which are the two things that they say they're doing all of this for, is to increase access and quality. The tiered reimbursement system helped us to get there. Why would we dismantle the very system that made us a national leader? These funding cuts don't just affect the children whose families receive the subsidies. They affect every child in our program. When we lose funding, we lose the ability to pay these competitive wages to have those qualified teachers that you were talking about. It means losing them. We lose the ability to invest in high quality materials and curriculum and enrichment activities. We lose the ability to maintain smaller class sizes and individualized attention. That means lower outcomes for children. Middle class families who may not qualify for subsidies, they still benefit from the quality enhancement that those subsidies make possible. When we're funded adequately, we can offer better care to every child in our program. But when funding is cut, quality drops across the board. That's not just a subsidy issue, it is a community issue. Some may ask, what is the long-term cost of keeping the tiered model? The answer is simple. It's an investment, not a burden. The cost of maintaining the tiered model is a commitment to child development, to workforce stability, and community health. It supports better school readiness, stronger family outcomes, and more resilient early education workforce. The cost of eliminating it? Program closures. And we're already seeing that. Programs all across the state, we're hearing from providers that they're already planning to close their doors when these cuts go into effect. This affects everyone, not just the subsidy families. This affects every child that's enrolled in these programs. This is going to lead to educator turnover. You know, my dissertation was actually on staff retention in the childhood industry, and I focused on Arkansas because of the gains that Arkansas has made in early childhood education. But these cuts they're going to take all of that away. It's going to result in a reduced access to care as provider after provider is forced to close their doors, which is going to lead to lower education outcomes. You know, these children that are having to pull their kids, families pulling their kids because they can't afford it anymore, they're going to put them in illegal daycares, illegal in-home daycares, private babysitters, and things where they're not getting that high-quality education that they receive in these programs. Ultimately, this is going to be a reversal of the progress that made Arkansas a national leader. I'm asking you today to reconsider the shift, maintain the tiered reimbursement system. This is not just about funding. It's about the future of early childhood education in Arkansas. It's about the children who deserve safe, nurturing environments, and the early educators with the knowledge, skills, and abilities to prepare them for succession in kindergarten and in life. It's about the families, low income, middle income, working class, it doesn't matter. All of them rely on us every single day, and these cuts are going to impact what we are able to provide for them. You know, we talked a lot about putting a pause on this, but I'm asking moving forward that we stay with this cost model, because the market rate it's not we can't survive under a market rate. The cost model system that we're currently under, it's based on what it actually costs to provide high quality care. And when that funding is gone, I cannot maintain it. My teachers, my staff members that hold master's degrees, I will have to let them go after this. I will not be able to afford the teachers that I have. That's going to cause the quality of my programs to plummet. So I'm asking you please to consider early childhood education. We put so much focus on young children. We put focus on families in our communities, as we should. But it's got to start with providers, because quality really starts with us. It starts in our programs. We're the ones providing the service that provides stability to our workforce. It was important during COVID, and it should still be important now. Thank you.
We've got several questions. Thank you guys for sticking with us.
Representative McKenzie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A few questions. Dr. Aguilar, anything left? Yes. Okay, a few questions. So you did a great job with eliminating your percentage, the size of your facility, the size of SRA students. What is your private pay tuition for families not on SRA?
Well, that goes back to market rate and what's affordable, because my programs are spaced out over 3 different cities. It varies. But on average, I would say that our infants, probably those spots are around $195 a week, down to $175 for our pre-K children. And it's a little different depending on which city the program is in, because we base those rates off of market.
Correct. So that's roughly $800 to $650 a month.
Yes, sir.
What amount of copay, on average, and this is on average in 4 facilities across a big white swath area, amount of copay do you collect?
Well, because, and this is not the case, I know, for a lot of people, but because the tiered reimbursement rates are higher than what my private tuition rates are, we don't collect copays. We eat that cost as a loss because we're already getting above what I would charge them as a private pay facility. So we don't charge our families in our program for the copays.
Is there any other subsidies, any other government programs, any other philanthropy grants that you receive for your 4 facilities?
The only thing that we get, we're on the child nutrition program, so we receive reimbursement for our food costs. Some of our food costs.
Ms. Hess? So in your facility, how many students do you have?
I'm licensed for 10, but right now I have 4.
Great. And I was really interested to hear that you have an at-home facility, because I think, I don't know if I'm not supposed to say this, but I think the state has done a hard job of making at-home facilities feasible. And that I do believe that that is a way that we're going to deal with the crisis, which I don't think it's necessarily a crisis, and it's illuminating more of the problem. It's not a crisis, it's some market failure. Child care is a market failure. We have 218,000 students in the state of Arkansas that qualify under 5 years and under that would require some form of child care, from 1 to 1.1%, or 1 to 1.1 FTEs of a family member that needs to do full-time work. This program represents 22,000 people, roughly. It starts talking about nutrition at 25% rollover. Private pay, are all 4 of your students currently on SRA?
All of mine are private pay, yes.
Okay. Do you receive any other philanthropy, subsidy, government assistance?
The only other thing that I do receive is CSEFP, which is our food reimbursement, which provides an amount for food.
How many other facilities are there like yours in and around within like 20 miles of Romance?
I'm going to say 3.
Okay. And then large-scale child care facilities?
We are currently, I believe we're just under 200 in the state.
Representative Bott?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank y'all for being here. You both did an excellent job. I want to thank everybody out there that's here also that doesn't get to speak today. I do want to correct a couple of things though, and I'm on your side, but I want to correct you. We're not cutting anything. And I want all of y'all to hear that. Your stories that you read just a second ago, those all need to be sent to the Congress, our Congress delegation. Every one of y'all out there should be emailing our Congress delegation, because we're not making a cut. But if somebody's just watching online and they only catch part of that, they think that we're the ones that are making the cut here in Arkansas. And I want to make it very clear, we're not doing this. We can't keep a tier that's not actually our tier. It's the federal government's tier. So I want to encourage y'all. Again, you did an excellent job. I think everyone sitting up there in that audience should let their voice be heard to our congressmen, senators, and our representatives up there. Because they're the ones ultimately who was in charge of trying to get this push through for Arkansas. I value what you do. I believe y'all do a good job at what you do. But I just want to make it very clear to anyone who's watching online that it's not us making these cuts. But thank y'all for being here.
Would you agree?
Yeah,
That's supposed to be a question. Sorry, ma'am.
No worries, no worries. Representative Mayberry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your statements. I want to ask you a few things. One, I think many people are hearing, oh, well, this is going to affect parents, those with young children, and really only those on vouchers who are using vouchers. But this is a much larger issue.
Yes.
Because there are some facilities that also use vouchers and the private pay at the same time. And if they're not receiving that same amount of money that daycare, I mean, you said, some of them might close up. But even bigger than that, there's probably many who say, I don't have children, this is not an issue to me, but they own a business. Or they're working here at the Capitol or wherever, and suddenly now they have an employee that they've been relying on coming to work, and now that employee can't come to work because they don't have child care. Can you kind of share a little bit about really the bigger picture of how this affects the economy as a whole? I mean, during COVID, when everything was shutting down, child care workers were essential employees. Okay, do you mind sharing a few thoughts?
Well, as I stated, with me having that higher reimbursement rate, it allows me to keep my private pay tuition down. But it's going to affect, the only way that I'm going to be able to survive is letting go my high quality teachers and raising tuition rates across the board for everyone. And so that hurts everybody because even the families that don't receive subsidies, it's going to stretch their budgets to a point that they're not going to be able to afford child care. And when they can't afford child care, they're going to have to pull their kids. But programs are going to have to close. They're not going to be able to make it because our budgets are already established. So my budget, 70 to 90% of budgets usually fall back on wages for staffing. And my budget's already set based on these reimbursement rates. So what I'm having to do in 7 days is readjust a budget where I've lost 40% of my funding. And I don't know how I'm going to do that without hurting people that I care about.
I was just going to say, this is really going to affect spots. We haven't talked a lot about slots where, facilities do not have open spaces for infant and toddler. There's none out there. So that is a difficulty. They talked about opening up spots for more families to be on, SRA. Where are they going? There's not anything open. And if we're having facilities closed because of this, where are they going?
And you mentioned infant and toddler, and one thing that I've kind of learned through the years is just how much more expensive it is for any child care facility to even offer infant and child care.
Yes.
Infant care, because the cost is just that much more. Do you mind?
The cost is much more because of the ratio. If you have infants, then your ratio, I'm licensed for 10, but that depends on the ages of the children. I never kept 10 kids because I didn't have 10 kids over the age of 3. So I always have kept families, usually an infant and a toddler and a preschooler. So I kept all the children of that family. And so that's what reduces your rate of children. So that's why usually infant care costs more. And that's why there are a lot of facilities that don't take infants. Because it's a much difficult, babies are tough. I mean, they're the best, but they're tough.
You don't really make any income off of infant spots, very little, because of that ratio. When you can only have 5 in a classroom to 1 teacher versus a pre-K classroom where you can have 12 to 1 teacher, it's a lot harder to offer infant care.
And again, I'm family home and she's center, so there is some differences in our ratios. So that is, I'm by myself. I don't have employees, so.
Yeah,
you don't want me having a lot of infants.
I did hear one critic just say, well, if they must have an awful business model if this much of a cut is going to make them go out of business. And I sit there and say, you don't know anything about early childhood education then, because
really, many, to my understanding, many are not making lots of money on any of this. They're just barely getting by and really see themselves more as providing services that are there.
Do you agree? I would definitely agree. I mean, I believe it's definitely a calling, but I don't think it's something that we all want to do for free. I mean, we do this because we love it. We stay in it because we love it. We have a relationship with these children. We have a relationship with these families. We're part of our community. And I mean, I go to games, to basketball games, football games. I go to baseball games. And, you know, kids that I've had from years back will come and want a picture. So, I mean, it's relationships. And it is something that it grows, and it's deeper, but we can't do it for free. And I kind of feel like that's where we're expected to go, is we'll eat those costs, or we'll do it out of the goodness of our hearts. And I wish we could. That's not sustainable.
Representative Cooper.
Christine, thank you for being here. Really appreciate your testimony. And thank you for providing early childhood education services in our rural area of western White County. Greatly appreciate that. Could you share with the committee, give us some insight on the differences and the difficulties of providing care in a rural area? I mean, Heber Springs, Searcy, those are the nearest towns to us, quite a distance away. You're providing a great service for families that work in the small towns like Rosebud and Mount Vernon. So could you give us a little insight on the differences and the challenges and how these changes in funding would make that even more difficult for you?
Sure. Again, I do not have any SR children right now. SRA children, sorry. But yes, it is difficult. There are a few other providers in my area, but again, they're in the same situation as me. There's only a certain amount of spots that they can open. Difficulty is if we close, we don't have anything. Our school has an ABC program within the school. We had a Head Start, and it has not been open in some time now. So as far as Rosebud kids, there's me and another provider in Rosebud, and then there's one in the Mount Vernon Rosebud area, and that's really about it. Now we are licensed, and so now I don't know about other people that provide care that are friends and family or unregulated. I don't know the numbers of that, but the difficulty is we work long hours. We work when our parents need us. Sometimes that means opening your door at 4:30 in the morning if they work in a factory in Searcy and need to be there. That means some evening care if necessary. That means opening if a family needs you. In certain situations, sometimes their families live out of town, and sometimes you're the closest one there. So, but there's difficulties in many ways as far as sometimes it's difficulty not having a support system. So having a support staff or having a support system like A-State and Curricular Concepts and different people that give us support and mentoring, we rely on that. We need these support entities to give us training and to give us just mentorship. So I hope I answered your question.
Okay, Representative Steele.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Thanks so much, Madam Chair. Very quickly, Doctor, you mentioned that the economic impact on your facility has been about $6,000 a week. Is that all your facilities combined?
Yes, sir.
And how many do you have again?
I have 4.
4. That's tough. How long do you think you could sustain that type of?
To be honest, I don't even know. It without making drastic changes, not long.
Do you? You mentioned you had some workers with bachelor's and master's degrees. how much more do you have to compensate them for their education experience?
I have, we have a wage scale that's based off of experience and education. And so I have teachers that do make $13 an hour, but the more education they have, it goes up to where I have some staff members that are making $25 an hour. They're on salary, they receive PTO, paid vacations. We offer a comprehensive insurance program. Like she mentioned with the TEACH program, I've got 6 teachers that are getting college education through that, and I'm responsible for 10% of their